Yo. What's good, guys? Can you guys hear me all right? Awesome. So, first of all, thank you guys for waiting in here. What up, Doc? How you doing, bro? I'm gonna go ahead and share this to the Discord server. If you guys haven't joined the Discord server, I think most of you guys are in there, if not all of you. But yo, what's up, Goku? Feel free to. There's a link in the description. I'm just gonna make an announcement really quick that I'm streaming this. We are live at everyone. Okay. So, perfect. Naruto debaters suck. Hashram over Jubito. 6, you're going to like this one. So, basically, the reason why I'm doing this video, and first of all, I just want to say to the creators who I'm going to be covering in this, so it's Noodles and Shad is the video I'm going to be going over. And I don't have any hard feelings towards those guys. We're all on good terms. I just I feel like there's kind of a lack of logical or argumentative understanding in the debate community, particularly in Naruto, but I imagine it's the case in other communities as well. I'm just in the Naruto community, so that's what I'm most familiar with. But I'm going to be going over this debate between Noodles and Shad. Yo, what's up, Adam? What's up, Spicy? I'm going to be going over... Bro, both of them are cooked. Yeah, Mono knows. Mono and I have talked about this. Again, no hard feelings to them. I just feel like there's a real problem in the anime debate community, and then specifically the Naruto debate community, with understanding argumentation and what makes a good argument, what makes a bad argument, understanding logical fallacies, things like that. So this is actually part 2 to my Naruto 101 or Power Scaling 101 series. And I'll actually, I'll go back and change the visibility for the first one I did, which was like breaking down Noodles' debunk to myself and virtue. I'll go make that public as well, so that we have... I just want to put a series together to help people understand how power scaling works and how to make good arguments, things like that. So, yeah, we're going to... so let's be clear, this live was caused by Noodles, right? Yeah, so basically, and just so you guys know, Noodles and I are trying to figure out how to get our debate that we're going to have on a bigger content creators page. When we figure that out, we are going to do it. But as of right now, I'm relegated to just doing this. But yeah, basically, I'm going to go over this debate, all the arguments on there that are not very good, how to make better arguments, things like that. Philosopher of Thin Ties. As long as the calves are thick, you know what I mean? But yeah, without any further ado, I feel like we might as well just hop into it. Let me go ahead and get this video up. Here we go. Make sure that you guys can see this. But yeah, I have some notes that I'm going to be taking down while we're doing this. I'm going to go over sort of some basic stuff that some people might not know. What up, Jaded? And just kind of like help people to understand why these arguments are not good. Oh, it looks like my window capture thing is not working. Yeah, give me 1 second. But yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I felt it was necessary after listening to Noodles versus 6, Noodles versus Troy, and Noodles versus Shad, because a lot of the same arguments came up, and they're not very good. But yeah, give me 1 second. Good Lord. But yeah, I'm just going to go through this entire thing. It's like 40 minutes long, so this might be a longer stream. Hope that's okay. But yeah, let's go ahead and dig into it. me know if you guys can hear this all right. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what display resolution this is. It should be 1080, but I could be wrong. You guys can't hear it? Okay, okay, 0. Can you guys hear me? Check, 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 check. Yeah, let me know if you guys can you guys hear me or no? Got you. Okay, give me 1 second. I got you. Yeah, there we go. That's why. Okay. Should be able to hear it now. Okay, cool.
And once I realized that that's what the debate was, that says so, or anything that would display so, 6 offered me a possibility that the debate with Troy, the debate with 6, and the debate with Shot all have one thing in common, and it's just skepticism. They all have these skeptic-type arguments that they try and present to denote possibilities that aren't even necessarily in the manga, but just possibly make scaling the character impossible. So, like, for instance, in the 6th debate yesterday, we were talking about Toby Rama tagging Jubito, and despite there not being anything in the manga that says so, or anything that would display so, 6 offered me a possibility that it could be possible that Jubito's just not going full speed here. And the reason the debate didn't last that long after this is because when he makes a claim like this, he's shifting the debate from a Naruto debate to a philosophical one that's about skepticism, about these arbitrary possibilities that could potentially happen, but also might not potentially happen. And once I realized that that's what the debate was, I didn't feel as though it would be that interesting, and I kind of had editor fatigue from just editing a bunch of videos back and forth for the last few days. I've been editing.
So just for context, for anybody who didn't listen to it, basically, he said that, and this is something, I wasn't going to pull up the video, but it's pretty quick to summarize. Essentially, their debate started by Noodles saying that Toby Rama tagging Jubito is a better feat than what Minato has. And 6 was basically like, well, why is he going all out? And Noodles said, because he has killing intent. Okay? So he took a position. He said he has killing intent, so he's going all out. 6 was like, well, it's possible he's not going all out, especially because he's unstable. Like, so we know that, if you're unstable, you're not able to control your chakra properly, it'll be difficult to like go all out, like do what you can normally do. And he basically goes into this, what he's talking about, where he says that it devolves into an infinite regression and therefore you can't scale any characters. This is something I'm going to go over here in a second because it's super important and it is a gigantic misunderstanding. A random possibility. Yeah, exactly. But then Noodles went on in that debate to also say that he didn't take a position, but he definitely did. He just straight up said that he thought that Jubito was going all out because he had killing intent. And then 6 questioned not only whether or not he was going all out because of the unstable nature of that version of Jubito, but also why killing intent leads to somebody necessarily going all out. Like, you can have killing intent and not go all out. For example, if I want to kill an ant, I can just step on the ant, but I don't have to like stomp it with my full force, right? So killing intent doesn't necessitate going all out. And so 6 put that into question, and Noodles just kind of like ended up spurging afterwards as he was talking about, because he said he has editor fatigue. So it was just kind of a bad argument on both sides for him because he just wasn't able to counter very basic skepticism, which is fair. So there is something that I want to pull up really quick before we go any further, which is just the weight of arguments. So let me go ahead and get this up. Go ahead and move this over. So basically, this is super simple. In argumentation, here. Weight refers to the significance or persuasiveness of an argument, considering both the quantity and quality of evidence supporting it. It's about how strongly an argument compels someone to believe it, even if the overall conclusion has some degree of uncertainty, right? So different arguments based on the quality and quantity of the argument have different levels of weight. This is important because one of the things that it seems a lot of people do not understand is how this works. So I went ahead and wrote this out. Basically, the pinnacle of argumentative weight is certainty. So it's something that's necessarily the case. So if you were to say, like axiomatic things are a good example of this. If you were to say like Naruto is unmarried, therefore he's a bachelor. It's like those things are axiomatically true. So it's necessarily the case that he's unmarried, right? Flame with the 5. Thank you so much, bro. I appreciate that. Let's go. Big time. Thank you, man. So there are certainty claims, which if you make an argument from certainty, essentially the highest form of argumentative weight is something is certainly the case. Then you have just below that probability, which a lot of people refer to as likelihood, where you can establish that in most cases, this is going to be happening. So more than 50% of the time. So if I were to say, if you're arguing about whether or not Naruto would use shadow clones in a battle, you would just say, in most battles, Naruto uses shadow clones. Therefore, if we have a hypothetical battle that we're debating about, it's probably the case he would use shadow clones. And you can display this by grabbing, let's just say there are 15 battles he participates in, and in 13 of them he uses shadow clones. It is more than likely the case in other battles that he would use shadow clones, because you have a preponderance of evidence that suggests the majority of the time he would do it. Then you have plausibility, which a lot of people do not understand, like at all. So before I go to that, let's hit possibility. So possibility is just something is logically possible. It's not logically contradictory. So we'll get into this in a minute, but possibility claims have a basis. They have a basis in logic. To say something is possible, as long as it's not contradicting the laws of logic, has a basis, okay? So one of the things that Noodles is going to say here in a little bit is this is a baseless possibility. There's nothing in the manga that suggests this. Doesn't have to be anything in the manga that suggests it, because logic suggests it, suggests it's possible. So if you say he's going all out, right? And then somebody says, well, it's possible he's not going all out. Those are equal possibilities without an additional basis. So you have one basis with possibility. With plausibility, you have to establish an additional basis, but you don't have to make it to where it's more likely to be the case. Or more likely than not to be the case, right? You just have to, plausibility is essentially reasonability. And the reason why this is above possibility is because, oh, dude, having it broken out step by step is helpful. No problem at all. Thank you so much. Yo, code with 10. Appreciate you, bro. What if I was secretly 9 from Kyoto? The arch enemy is 6 from Tokyo. That would be gangster. I would love to see you guys fight. But yeah, so plausibility is something that I like to use a lot. Please ban this guy's crazy. Because it's a lot easier to defend than probability. And most of the time, so basically, if you look at this too, certainty is over probability. So if you have certainty and evidence that suggests certainty, it would be above evidence that suggests probability, which would be above evidence that suggests plausibility, which would be over evidence that suggests possibility. The reason plausibility is above possibility is because you have two bases, right? So if you were to say, it's reasonable to assume X because we have an example of them doing this, right? So if you say, it's reasonable to assume Kakashi would use a Raikiri against a strong opponent because we see him use Raikiri against strong opponents. That's not a claim that it's more likely to be the case than not. It's a claim that it's reasonable to accept that would be the case because we see it's not only possible that he can use the Raikiri, right? But it's plausible. Or even on a lower level than that, you could say it's plausible that Shinobi use Chakra to amp their physicals in battle because we see examples of them doing this in battle. So therefore, it's reasonable to assume that they would do this. Whereas if somebody was claiming, well, it's possible that they wouldn't use Chakra to amp their physicals, plausibility would go above possibility because possibility has one basis, logic. Plausibility has two bases, logic plus typically an empirical example of that. So it's going to get kind of nerdy, but there's something called epistemology, which is basically how we know something to be true. This is like Aristotle type stuff. I don't want to get too granular, but there are a bunch of different epistemologies, like how we know things to be true. Empiricism is you have like hard evidence of it. It's like sensory experience. So you see a feat happen, right? So that's how you know that it's reasonable to assume that this is the case. Reason or logic is also an epistemology. You can say that things are true or likely to be true based on them fitting within logical reasoning. Pragmatism is another one. It's just examining the outcomes of if this thing were to happen or if it were not to happen. So there are different lines of thought and ways to defend your arguments. And with plausibility, you have both reason, logical possibility, as well as typically empiricism, something being shown to be the case. So before I move on, another good example of this is if you go outside and you see that your car is gone, right? You could say it's possible aliens came and stole it, right? But it's more plausible that some human stole it, or maybe it got towed or repoed or something, right? Because we have real world examples of that. So not only is it rooted in logical possibility, that's a basis, it's also rooted in empiricism. We know that this is something that has happened. So not only can it happen, it has happened, okay? So then implausibility, improbability, and impossibility are just the inverse of those top three. Implausibility would just mean essentially like we have examples of this not happening. Improbability means that we have enough evidence to suggest that more often than not, it's not going to be the case. And then impossibility means that if the premises are true, it would logically follow this is not going to happen. So I know there was a lot, but these are the basics of argumentation, okay? And these are things that a lot of Naruto debaters, including Noodles, particularly with possibility, plausibility, probability, don't seem to understand. So we will get back into it. Go. All right.
Editing all night and stuff. I think in the last 5 days I've slept twice. But yeah, anyway, like I didn't really feel the need to stay in there very long. And
Six said, I'd just like to say before I leave that the way Noodles was debating would basically lead to the idea that whoever makes the claim first wins. Yeah.
I should have, in hindsight, I should have given you guys a better debate on that front. So a debate that's supposed to be about Toby Rama and Minato. And yeah, I like pinned him in the Toby Rama debate. And I demonstrated that his position was baseless and had no foundation to it and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, so this is the problem. His basis was rooted in logical possibility. And so was Six's. So if you have two positions, two counterintuitive positions that both have basis in logical possibility, both of them are equally weighted, right? So if he makes a claim, I think I think Jubito's going all out, and then Six says, well, it's equally possible based on the laws of logic, the law of non-contradiction, things like that, that he might not be going all out, then the burden would be on the person who's on the assertive, which was Noodles, to add a plausibility argument or a possibility or a probability or certainty argument in order to trump the possibility argument, right? So not only does logical possibility have a basis in logic, but also if you have two logically possible things, the person on the assertive now has the burden of adding a probability raiser or likelihood raiser to bring it to plausibility at bare minimum in order to get their point to go through.
Went into all the philosophical reasons for why I believe Six was in the wrong for making that kind of position. I never got to finish the Minato versus Toby. This mods and his name's Shad. I hope you guys. Somebody else.
Yo, can y'all hear me?
Yep. So this is their
all
debate with
right.
Shad.
I'm getting sent this particular stream the last few days, and I see that we're in here. Okay. The first argument I will be presenting is that Minato and Naruto both say that Jubito is more perfect than even I in my dreams. And Minato specifically says he has dreamlike power. Naruto says he's more perfect than in my dreams. These two statements indicate that Jubito surpasses both Minato and KCM2 Naruto, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. You're aware that Toby Rama...
I would have just said I agree.
You said what?
You could just ask me if I agree Jubito is stronger than Minato, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just presenting an argumentation format, so...
Okay.
Yeah, and...
I'm reacting to Noodles versus Shad, Minato versus Toby Rama.
As since I think that this would indicate that Jubito surpasses both Minato and Naruto, and I think that he's obviously the fastest character in the series at the point that he shows up. He's the first six.
His audio cuts out a couple times.
Yeah. Like, there's a reason you put no on the 6 pads character.
Yo, TG with the 10. Thank you so much. He said, my man Noodles sounds the same at 1.5, 1 times 2 times speed. I don't know. That's possible. Dude, that's true. I was going to play this at 1 time speed, but then I put it in 1.5, and I was like, damn, it just sounds exactly the same. 6 said, and one more thing, guys. Some claims just shouldn't be made. Just because skepticism defeats your claim doesn't mean skepticism is bad. It means your argument is bad. Exactly. 100% the case. If you cannot combat somebody offering a logical possibility, right? What that would mean is that your argument is not good. Because if both sides are logically possible, they have equal weight. Therefore, again, the person on the assertion has to apply plausibility or probability or certainty in order to usurp the equal possibility.
Yeah, my internet's kind of bad.
Yeah, you cut out completely. I didn't hear anything you said. You started.
Hold on 1 second. Let me try to get to it, bro.
We came a long way from the SS.
That has come before. They're stronger and faster than everyone that's come before. So the argument I'm making is that Toby Rama has a feat of reacting and tagging Jubito on panel, so he would just have a better speed feat than anything Minato has ever shown.
I knew it. Okay. Are you using when he grabs the orb or the paper bombs? Which way?
The one where he puts the seal under his armpit.
We don't see how he placed that seal.
With his hand.
Yeah,
that's how all Flying Thunder God seals are placed.
Yeah, but
that's when
we definitely do see how he plays the seal, but that's neither here nor there.
I'm assuming, but I'm assuming you're saying with that he blitzes Jubito. What if he just makes contact with Jubito while Jubito? Okay, what if he makes contact with him while Jubito's bisecting him?
Well, yeah, he did. That is exactly what he did. That's like what's described as what happened. I'm not saying he's faster than Jubito, but the fact that he can physically react to him at all shows that he has a better speed feat than anything Minato's ever displayed.
Okay. So this is okay. So Shad here shouldn't have just assumed his position was that he was blitzing him. Maybe he was trying to like premise trap him into a position that would be a lot harder to argue for. So I don't think that's the best way to go about it. But then Noodles here, let me just rewind it really quick.
Well, yeah, he did. That is exactly what he did. That's like what's described as what happened. I'm not saying he's faster than Jubito, but the fact that he can physically react to him at all shows that he has a better speed feat than anything Minato's ever displayed.
So you cannot say that without connecting it to, like, so whenever you say things like that, you have to showcase why that feat is above Minato's top end feats, right? And without connecting this feat to a Minato top end feat, you cannot defend that. You can't, because like, for example, what's the connective tissue between Minato arriving to the battlefield before Toby Rama and Toby Rama tagging Jubito? There is no connective tissue. There's no way to say that one of them is faster or slower than the other. So you can say like intuitively that one would be better, but you have to have an additional argument outside of just saying, well, like, this is just more impressive to me.
Okay, when does Minato try to tag Jubito while Jubito is attacking him?
He runs at him and tries to cut him with the kunai, then Jubito cuts his kunai in half and then chops off his arm.
Yeah.
So he tried to attack him right there, and he said, "This is my chance," and then he tries to attack him. So yeah, he just doesn't skill.
Actually? Hold up, what is that? 640?
It's just a Jubito fight. You'll have to look at it.
639. That's not
639. Bit.
So where I would have gone here, and Shad doesn't take this route, which I think is kind of a mistake. Where I would have gone here is I would have said, okay, so even if we assume that's the case, like which I would, like Minato was trying to attack Jubito. Toby Rama does tag Jubito with the FTG seal. The way to go about this would be, okay, why are these two versions of Jubito the same speed? It's entirely possible that stabilized Jubito is faster than unstable Jubito. And in fact, it's more plausible or reasonable to assume, right, that this is the case because we know that chakra control directly affects your physicals and your jutsu output. We have examples of this in the series. For example, Sakura and Tsunade's strength goes up massively because of their insane chakra control. So we know that physical combat ability can be lowered or raised depending upon your chakra control. So if unstable Jubito possibly has worse chakra control than stable Jubito because he's like mindless, right? Then it would be reasonable to assume that stable Jubito could be faster. And what he would say is, oh, well, this is just a baseless possibility. Now remember, possibilities, as long as they don't contradict the laws of logic, right? The law of non-contradiction, the law of the excluded third, things like that, they have a basis in logic. So they're not baseless possibilities, okay? But more than that, I just established plausibility that stable Jubito would be above unstable Jubito, because I showed an example, an empirical example in the series that showcases that better chakra control directly affects your physicals. So then, if you make that argument, if Shad makes that argument right there, it would now be the burden would now be upon Noodles to make a probability argument that they are equal or relative to one another, which is just kind of an impossible burden. But again, like I brought up earlier, the weight of argumentation matters. So possibility, plausibility, probability. You can only defeat a plausibility claim, which is the one that I just made, or plausibility argument, which is the one I just made, by offering a probability argument or a certainty argument, because those have more weight. So since he's on the assertion here, it would be up to him to do that. Shad doesn't take that route, but that would be the way to go here.
Give me a second. Yeah, I got it pulled up.
The final boss appeared. Final boss appeared, chat. In your chat for you.
Okay, so he blitzes. Hey, leaving. What chapter does he chop Minato's arm?
So when he's like, I got away safely, and then Jubito points out, and he's like, are you sure about that? And the orb's about to blow up.
Hold up.
So he like literally like perception blitzed him.
Isn't it when he gets his arm chopped off? Isn't that while he's mentally nerfed?
So this would be the other way to go, is the mental nerf argument. But this presupposes, or at least grants, the idea that these two versions of Jubito are relative, which is not necessary. There's no reason to grant that. Absolutely no reason for that. So the fact that Shad does grant that here makes his position a little bit weaker, because now you have to defend the mental nerf, which is totally reasonable and possible to defend, but it's a little bit more difficult argument than just establishing the plausibility that they're not relative, right? Because if those versions of Jubito are not relative, then those feats have no connective tissue.
Is there any indication that he's mentally nerfed there?
He gets mentally nerfed when he sees Obito.
Initially, maybe. Is there any indication that he's mentally nerfed in that moment?
Well, hold on. That implies that the mental nerf was like so temporary that it wore off within a few chapters. Where do you get that idea from?
I'm not saying that it's like even like really a mental nerf. I think it's just him being momentarily stunned because he realizes it's Obito, and he starts like they start like showing the flashbacks of like him as a kid until like Minato's like upset about it or whatever. And in those moments, I think it's proper to say he's dazed. But in the moment where he's like actually attacking Jubito, he says, "This is my chance," and he's like clearly ready to engage with him. So in that moment,
Yes, I could do this real time, Spicy Boy.
I don't think that you can just extrapolate the dazed to the entire fight. That would just be an assumption.
Well, okay, but that's not even like how depression works. You're saying like Minato can turn it on and off.
So I think this is also kind of the wrong way to go about it, because we do just have evidence in that fight, at this point in the fight, that it's 641, I believe, that he should be still in that daze. So the argument would essentially be, if Minato is in a daze, and the cause is, here, let me zoom back in. The cause is seeing Obito, which is stated, like seeing Obito in that state, right? Then you have evidence here of him. He's getting ready to go take him on, right? And then you see him say Rin. Then we see him react to it. You see him like in pain. He's thinking about Obito. He says Rin again. He then throws the kunai. Then he's literally crying, right? All of this is stuff that Minato is seeing right now. Then he's continuing to think about Obito. You then have Obito's whole like panic moment, blah, 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 in pain. And then he says, as he's about to attack, "Here I come, Obito. Who are you?" And then we see like the shock on his face. And then he stabilizes. Double exclamation point, question mark, finally. And then that's when that feat happens. So if you're granting, as Noodles, that he was in a mental nerf because of Obito, because of Obito's state, and then you see all of this happening, where he's thinking about Obito, where this is still wearing on his mind, he's seeing his student go through immense pain, He's seeing his student confused about who he is, right? All this stuff. And then he suddenly stabilizes, change in form, right? And then you have the question mark about what's going on. Then it would be reasonable to assume that this is still happening, that this mental nerf is still in place. And in fact, we know the exact moment when the mental nerf is broken, because Data Book 4 tells us that when Naruto fist bumps with him later on after this, that he is shaken from his stupor. So Noodle's granting that he does have a stupor or a daze, and then saying, well, there's nothing in that fight that suggests he still has it, can be countered easily by just showing this. So Shad doesn't take that route. I'll let you guys just watch.
Off, like deciding that he wants to attack Jubito in certain instances just turns off his depression. Why do you think that?
Well, like that's what happened with Hiruzen and Orochimaru. Orochimaru was fighting Hiruzen, and Hiruzen was like trying to reconcile with the fact that he was have to fight his former apprentice. And
so this is why this is not a good argument, because it opens up the possibility for somebody to say, well, we have a basis in other fights where somebody just like locks in, right? So we know it's possible for somebody to just lock in and, stop being mentally nerfed. We see it with Hiruzen and Orochimaru. So then you would need, as Shad here, to then establish plausibility on his side. Now, he kind of did with how depression works, but that presupposes that this is depression and not just like shock or something, which Noodles doesn't attack either. So kind of a gaffe on both parts. But there are just a lot stronger arguments to be made here for the Minato side and the Toby Rama side, to be fair.
During that fight, there's a moment where he finally achieves that clarity that he's going to have to kill Orochimaru, and he locks the fuck in immediately right then and there, and then deals with the Edo Tenseis and Reaper Death Seals Orochimaru. So yeah, you can just kind of like lock the fuck in. That is in fact how they do.
But with Hiruzen, it's stated and shown that he resolves himself, and he gets mental amp by the will of fire. Those two things are not present for Minato.
I mean, they don't have to be present, but I'm just saying that those things can happen. So even if
I agree, but I'm more so concerned with.
So where Shad could have taken this as an evidence of absence claim, which would be a good claim, which is essentially when somebody's in a battle and they're mental nerfed, and then they lock in and they're able to like fight on their normal footing, we get evidence of it. We see this with Hiruzen primarily. We see this with Naruto against Gaara. We see this several times. So therefore, this is a implausibility claim. It would be implausible to say that he's locking in at some point in this fight without that evidence. So basically the way the evidence of absence claim works is we have a precedent for expecting a certain kind of evidence if a particular thing is happening. So like if P then Q, if X then Y, therefore in the absence of Q or Y, P or X is probably or reasonably not happening. So then that would be a good argument here that would establish implausibility for the position that Noodles is taking, which would help Shad here.
Like, because with the Hiruzen, because that example is true. Like, with that, you can give evidence that he resolves himself and then gets amped. But I'm asking, what is the evidence present for Minato?
I don't think Hiruzen's mentally amped. I think he just locks in and he's like, okay, I'm not.
The will of fire just stated amped. I can just show you that.
So this is kind of just a derail. There's no reason to have brought that up. You could have just brought up the resolve. Bringing up the will of fire amp doesn't really do anything here, because even if it is an amp, it's really just about whether or not he's resolved to fight at his normal capacity. Because it's like, if he's mentally nerfed, right, and let's just throw out the fact that he does get resolved. Let's assume that doesn't happen. Or actually, well, let's just assume that doesn't happen, right? What's to say that the will of fire amp overcomes the mental nerf that he has? They're both unquantifiable, so there's no real way to do that. So it's kind of a difficult burden that Shad's put on himself. CB, who's loud? Am I loud or are they loud? Because I can change both of those. But yeah, do you guys understand sort of what I'm saying here? So like, you have debate is like chess. It's like, you make a move, they make a counter move. You make a stronger move, they have to make an equally strong move in order to counter that, right? So with possibility, in order to counter possibility, you only need possibility. But in order to negate possibility, you have to have plausibility or probability on your side. And as somebody on the assertive, if you have equal interpretations, equal possibilities. Oh, NCM is allowed, gotcha. You have to then establish a probability raiser to get it to plausibility, probability, or certainty.
Yeah, he's always had the will of fire though.
And
It's not really like the will of fire ever disappeared. It's just he was struggling with the fact that he's fighting Orochimaru, and then he decides to stop holding back. It's not the will of fire that's amplifying him there.
Yeah,
it's just he's actively deciding he's going to have to kill Orochimaru if he wants to protect the village.
But deciding that you're now going to put your life on the line for your loved ones, that is just stated to amp you. And that's what happens. Because he starts thinking about all the villagers and stuff, and he's like, the Hokage's job is to protect the people.
He was already putting his life on the line when he was holding back.
This honestly, this is why I said that the better way to go is just to say, you agree that he does resolve himself here. We get evidence that he resolves himself here. Therefore, in the absence of that evidence, it's implausible that Minato had resolved himself. And even if he had, whenever we see after he like goes in to attack Jubito, we see that he begins dealing with that again. We see that he's like thinking about Obito again, thinking about his dreams of being Hokage, all of that stuff, right? So you can just counter. You would have to say like he locks in after that, right? Which there's no evidence of, and we would expect evidence if that's what was going on.
It wasn't like he wasn't in danger of dying. He was like him and his staff, what's his name, Monkey King Inma, were both tripping the whole beginning of the fight. That there were some really dangerous threats that Orochimaru was throwing at him, like the Kusanagi blade. They start tripping about that when they see it come out. So they know that his life's in danger. So it's not like nothing about the will of fire changes in that fight. He's got the will of fire the whole time. It's just the moment that he decides, okay, I do have to kill Orochimaru. He does it. He tries. And that's when he stops holding back. It's a holding back thing. It's not like he becomes mentally amped. It's that he stops mentally nerfing himself.
But as far as like the whole putting your life on the line thing, that was more so in reference to the Reaper Death Seal. Because with that, that's not really the same as Orochimaru's other attacks. Because with those, Hiruzen can just avoid them and not die. But with the Reaper Death Seal, he's guaranteed to die. So that's why I mean, life on the line thing.
Yeah, but he didn't want to kill Orochimaru with it. And he fully expected it to do it. That's why he didn't use it.
At the end, he didn't expect to kill Orochimaru with it?
Well, like once he realizes he doesn't have enough chakra to get all of his body, he's like, well, I'm at least going to take your arm. So he did. The reason he didn't use the Reaper Death Seal is because he actually expected that just to kill Orochimaru. But Orochimaru's willpower was so strong that he was resisting like the soul manipulation of the Reaper Death Seal. So it's like in that moment, what's going on is he's just like, okay, I'm going to kill him now. Let's use the Reaper Death Seal. And he just immediately seals away Toby Rama and Hashirama. They were kind of mentally fucking with him too because he's having to fight his mentors. But then he's just like, nope, fuck it, seal them, then try to seal Orochimaru and kill him. Right? That's immediately. You can see there's like a mindset shift in Hiruzen the moment that happens, and he's like ready to throw down. And he's having the flashbacks of him as a younger man too and everything. So it's like.
So what's interesting about this is, sometimes an argument is good intuitively, you just don't know how to frame it, and I think that's what's going on with Shad here. He was essentially making an evidence of absence claim, but he wasn't framing it correctly. And the fact that Noodles accepted that there is evidence that he locks in, right? That establishes a basis to say that not only is it logically possible that he locked in, but we have a basis that when this happens, we get evidence. Therefore, in the absence of that evidence, it's implausible to say that that's happening. So it's like he has him here. He literally has him in checkmate on this point, but Shad just doesn't. He doesn't know exactly how to formulate the argument correctly.
A very similar situation to what's happening with Minato, and I don't think you can just. Go ahead.
I disagree with the last part, but I'm gonna attack the other stuff first. I think we kind of agree. It seems like you're going the same angle I'm reaching for, which is Hiruzen isn't able to receive the full benefits of the will of fire until he stops holding back and he resolves himself to take out a student. We agree there.
Yeah, he stops holding back. I don't think he's mentally amped at any point. I think he's just holding back, so he's mentally nervous.
Hold on. The will of fire, and if you want, I can pull up the statement. It is just stated to make you more powerful when you're protecting your loved ones.
I'm aware. I know that, but he never lost the will of fire. He's always had the will of fire.
But he only receives the full benefits of it when he's not holding back, though. When he resolves himself.
I don't think that's like this benefit thing. It's like either you have it or you don't, right? It's kind of like Inoki with the will of stone. Either he has the will of stone or he doesn't have the will of stone.
That's a real thing.
Yes, that's real. Oh. Yeah. There's a moment when you remember when Inoki gets up off the ground after Madara is defeated the.
I think they kind of go on this point about the will of fire for a bit, so I'm gonna fast forward because again, like I said, this doesn't move the needle at all. I hope you guys can see that. based on what I've sort of explained. So we're just going to fast forward through this. Real
Hokage. Hiruzen will do anything to want to kill him. He doesn't like the fact that he has to kill a student. I don't remember, buddy.
We have statements and showings of Hiruzen resolving himself, and we don't have to argue about the Will of Fire shit anymore, but I still think that answers. Yeah. We have him resolving himself and then receiving the full benefits of the Will of Fire, and that's just shown to make him more powerful. Whereas there are no things present with the Minato stuff where you can say, oh, this is what allowed him to overcome his like mental trauma or his days, if you want to use the actual word that the data book says.
Would you agree that it's also just a valid possibility that yeah, I get what you're saying. You're just saying like they actively show the moment Hiruzen's like, okay, I'm doing it now, right? Like I can kill him. Well, I would say that when he says, okay, now is my chance, kind of indicates that. But even if you don't want to say that's like objectively what it is, I think it's a reasonable possibility. So it's just kind of like an assumption to say that Minato is in fact dazed the whole time. Like there is just no evidence. Hold on.
If you're on the assertive, a possibility doesn't do anything for you. I need likelihood.
Well, to be fair, Noodles did establish plausibility there by pointing to the feat that I was pointing out earlier. But Shad has also established plausibility. So right now you have equal argumentation or argumentative weight, as we went over earlier. So it would be on Noodles to establish probability, but he didn't just establish a possibility. He established a possibility based in both logic and reason, which would make it plausible.
We both have assertions. You were asserting that he's dazed the whole time. I'm asserting that he's not.
I put in the question why you thought his days ran away. Sorry, not ran away.
I get that.
Wore off.
But you have to acknowledge that is a possibility. That he's just not dazed the whole time, right?
Yeah, that possibility exists for sure.
Okay, well, if that's a possibility, and we can't just assume he's dazed the whole Jubito fight. I mean, maybe he is, maybe he's not, right? It's like that kind of situation.
Yeah, but I agree it's possible. It's possible. We want to move forward.
Regardless, we can move past if, like, we already agreed Jubito is above every form of Minato anyway, so we can agree to that in the very beginning of the debate. So I
think he's stronger than the forms of Minato that he interacts with, yeah.
I think he's provably faster, too. Minato has no feats on that level. None. Like zero feats of random Jubito.
Hold on, that's that cross-verse argument from ignorance logic. I ain't really hearing that. Come on now, we inverse debaters.
What do you mean? He has no feats on that level?
Okay.
Would you say that like if a human has no feats, because he has no anti-feats, you can't say that Superman beats him? Probably beats him.
Well, if you said a human versus Superman?
Yeah, like let's say we just have like a regular human, like you just see some random, like let's say we just see some random ninja in the Shinobi Alliance that we never see them fight ever, but we just see some dude in like the background, right? Can we make the claim that Madara beats that guy?
Yes, you can. You can't make so, but you could also make the claim that the regular human does in the absence of an additional argument. So what he's doing right now is committing an argument from ignorance fallacy. He's basically saying, well, Madara has great feats. Pick random shinobi. They have no feats. They're like, so let's just use Sakumo, for example. And let's assume that the Sanin statements don't exist. Well, let's just go with somebody else. Let's go with, I'm trying to think of somebody who literally has, the ramen guy, right? So the ramen guy has no feats, okay? Madara has a ton of really high feats, okay? But that's not enough to say Madara is above the ramen guy. Because it's equally possible with just that the ramen guy is above Madara as it is that Madara is above the ramen guy. The absence of feats doesn't justify putting one above the other. Because it's equally possible, okay? So you're making a possibility claim here. In order for, and he goes on this for a while, and he continues to appeal to an absence of feats, which again, like, so for me to say, let's just assume that Hanzo has no feats in the manga, which he does, but let's just assume. I couldn't say, Chiyo has feats, but Hanzo has no feats, therefore Chiyo's above Hanzo. It's like, well, it's possible that Hanzo would actually scale above her. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening, right? So an argument from ignorance is not a good argument. It's like, it's people that would say, I don't see any evidence of God, therefore God doesn't exist. It's like, well, just because there's no evidence of it doesn't mean it's not the case. The premise does, or the conclusion does not follow the premise. It doesn't logically follow that God does not exist because you don't see evidence of him. He could exist without evidence. That's possible. So the route you would need to take there is to establish plausibility, or like a probability general rule. So for example, if he were to say something like a better version of this argument for Noodles would be, and I always say bad arguments are usually just one step away from being a good argument. So if he were to say, yeah, Madara has all these insane feats that put him at, like, let's just call it planetary and faster than light, and your average shinobi is not on that level. Your average shinobi is significantly below that. Therefore, it's reasonable to assume that if you just took an average shinobi and put him up against Madara, the average shinobi would lose. So the argument isn't the average shinobi that we're picking doesn't have feats. The argument is, generally speaking, whenever a shinobi is average, or you have like even if you randomly selected a shinobi out of all the shinobi that ever existed, it's more likely for you to pick out an average shinobi, right? So if you just picked a random guy, it's more likely to be the case that Madara would beat him because Madara is vastly above your average shinobi. So that would be a good argument. Saying we don't have evidence that Minato can move this fast, therefore he doesn't, is not a good argument.
Well,
Yeah,
versus
right.
a random shinobi?
Yeah, this is some random dude. Can we say that Madara probably beats that guy?
If you ask me, like, outside of an argument, like, do I think Madara is stronger? But I wouldn't claim it, because
You know where I'm getting with it, though.
Yeah, I know what you're getting
Because
at.
Madara has feats and that guy doesn't, it's most probable that Madara whoops his ass.
No, just because one person has feats and another person doesn't mean the person who has feats is therefore probably above the person without feats. Just went over this again. Just because no evidence, which I think there's evidence of God, but let's assume there's not. Just because there's no evidence of God doesn't mean God doesn't exist. It doesn't logically follow. It's logically possible that God does exist without evidence, just as much as it's logically possible that God doesn't exist without evidence. So saying there's no evidence to put random shinobi on Madara's level isn't a good enough justification to put Madara above random shinobi. Do you guys understand what I'm saying here?
I think we just disagree on because I would just call it an argument.
you
disagree.
don't wanna-
It is an argument for me.
The fact that you said
let's
if
not
we
argue
weren't
over
in
that
an
type of
argument,
logic.
listen, the fact you said if we weren't in an argument, you would agree with me, shows me that you like this type, not to say you're disingenuous, but that you don't actually believe in this counter argument.
Well, in an argument, you have to prove things.
Just a non-competitive discussion, you would be perfectly fine with that argument. So
Yeah,
you do
you just-
agree with the logic, it's just you don't like the fact that we're in.
Well, no, it doesn't agree with the logic because the logic is bad. The logic of Madara has feats, random shinobi no feats, therefore Madara above random shinobi doesn't logically track. This kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. I feel like Shad intuitively knows that what he's saying is incorrect and actually pointed out that it is an argument from ignorance, which is fallacious, but he doesn't know how to say why he agrees with this. Like why he would agree that generally speaking, a random shinobi would be below Madara. Because the argument for that would be, again, random shinobi. If you just picked a random shinobi, most shinobi are below Madara. Therefore, it's probably the case that a random shinobi would be below Madara. So it has nothing to do with the absence of feats. That's not a good argument. So he doesn't agree with the logic. I don't think that Shad is properly formulating why he doesn't agree with it. And Noodles is making a bad argument here because it is inherently fallacious. So it's just not a good argument. It's just like I feel like a lot of time people don't know how to justify their position, and that's what I'm trying to do here, I guess.
In this kind of format, this doesn't have to be like some serious debate. I'm not
No,
trying
I
to
got you. Yeah,
so,
if me and you were like, let's say we were like playing Fortnite together, and you just asked me, I would just say that nigga's probably weaker than Madara. But
Yeah.
if I had to prove it, like burden of proof, nigga proved that claim, I wouldn't be able to prove that nigga was weaker than Madara.
you can through induction. You totally can. Because like if I
we
see
disagree
Madara drop
there.
meteors on someone's forehead, that's evidence that he has like whatever quantified level of strength that is.
Cut out.
You, we knew to drop the app. I can't hear you.
My battery image popped up. I was saying, so like if we see Madara like drop these meteors down on somebody, right, and we can kind of like Cal can figure out how strong that is, how big the meteor is, whatever. Let's say it's country level, just for the sake of the discussion. I don't actually care about that, but let's say it's country level, and this guy doesn't have any feats that are country level. There's nothing to inductively indicate he's on that level, so it is more probabilistic that Madara is stronger, just because he is quantifiably that level. You would have to make an extra assumption to say that guy is that level. So just through induction, you would be able to say that it is most probable Madara would win, and on the same line of logic, you would say it is most probable Jubito's faster because he has better feats.
Right. So I've beat a dead horse with this, but again, the absence of feats does not indicate that person with feats is above the person without feats. Doesn't logically follow. Went over this like 10 times already. I don't think you guys need to hear it again.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think we just fundamentally disagree there because I mean that guy lacking a feat, that obviously doesn't disprove the idea that he could perform that feat. We don't know what he's capable
Yeah, exactly, Maven.
of. Yeah, and if that thing is unknown, I would just rather not make a claim.
Not the probability.
Yeah, I would just rather not make a claim about things that are unknown.
Well, I get you would rather not. The thing is, we're dealing in anime versus battle hypothetical. Talk about these things. We can't objectively prove who's going to win between two characters from two different verses, or even two characters that didn't fight in verse. You can't objectively prove that because we never actually saw it happen on panel.
Yeah, I wasn't even talking about objectively.
You have to kind of give some leeway. Yeah, we can't objectively prove it, but you have to kind of give some kind of leeway that, like, you know, we're going to see what they do have, see what this guy has, and we compare them, and who has the better is the most probable that's going to win. It's just a simple argument from induction. That's all that is. You're just making a probabilistic.
He's misusing argument from induction, right? So in the sense that he's making a fallacious argument and then trying to tie it to an argument from induction. He's placing induction on one side, the induction of Madara is at this particular level because of this feat, right? But there's no induction on the other side. Just because somebody doesn't have feats doesn't mean they have no, because like it's just as possible that that person is like regular human level as it is that they're Otsutsuki level in the absence of additional evidence, right? So again, if Noodles were to say something like, well, generally shinobi are not on the level of Madara, therefore a random shinobi is probably not on the level of Madara, that is a logical argument. The conclusion follows the premise. But saying Madara has feats, therefore he's probably above somebody who doesn't have feats is not a logical argument.
Claim based on evidence. So if Minato lacks the speed feats to be on Jubito's level, it is then more probable.
It's like I'm confused why we're even.
This also goes back to the connective tissue thing I was talking about earlier. There's nothing that connects the unstable Jubito feat from Toby Rama to the stable Jubito anti-feat from Minato, because those are inherently potentially two different versions of Jubito in terms of their physical capabilities. So you can't say that one feat is better or worse than the other.
Because the whole thing about the mental nerf, like, not saying I won that point, but if I did, it would just be to say Minato, when he gets his arm cut off by Jubito, it doesn't matter because he's not at full power there. So if Toby Rama,
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that like he is quote unquote at full power. Like, don't get it twisted. I'm just saying that like it's equally as possible that he is or isn't. I don't actually care about that though. I'm not even arguing that. I'm arguing that Toby Rama just objectively has a better speed feat than anything Minato's ever shown.
Yeah, but if Minato is mental nerfed and that's why he's not able to perform the same feat, then you can't like link the two.
I can't.
Again, this could have been totally circumvented if he just pointed out these two versions of Jubito are not the same, or reasonably not the same, because saying that he has objectively a better speed feat than Minato does, you would have to showcase why that's a better speed feat than what happened with Minato and Jubito. And there's no way to do that without connecting the versions of Jubito. You just can't do it. Like, if you have, so say for example, if both feats occurred against stable Jubito, then you could say Toby Rama's feat is better because you're having them fight against the same character, same version of the character, which would then allow for connective tissue between the two different feats. But in the absence of connecting those two characters, Minato and Toby Rama, to the same character in the same form, you can't say that. It would be like saying, because again, I think I established plausibility earlier for stable Jubito being physically superior to unstable Jubito. So it would be like saying, oh, well, Sakura is able to punch Naruto, and Sasuke in the Final Valley is like unable to defend against Naruto's attacks. Therefore, Sakura has a better feat in combat speed than Sasuke. It's like, well, the Naruto that Sakura hit was base off guard Naruto, and the Naruto that Sasuke was fighting was KN0 on guard rage amped Naruto. So you cannot connect those things. Same thing is true here. The feat against unstable Jubito from Toby Rama has no connection to the anti-feat against stable Jubito from Minato. That two different versions of the character. So this is why I said earlier, the best way to go about that is to establish some sort of potential delineation between those two forms, because then you don't end up in this position.
And because if there's no evidence he's on this level, and there is evidence Toby Rama is on this level, that means there's a more probabilistic conclusion that Toby Rama is faster. Because
no.
Even though he's mentioned nerfed or whatever, that doesn't really change. You also got base Minato in here, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? So you think that like base Minato beats Toby Rama, right?
Of course.
So what about the whole nine tails he has inside of him? You know what I mean? Like, does that not counter this quote unquote unquantifiable days? It could, right? It hypothetically could.
Yeah, I agree. The nine tails makes you stronger because you have nine tails chakra to amp your strength. But the thing with the mental nerf is that you're not able to utilize your chakra at your normal optimal levels because there's some type of blockage in your brain. So you just can't wield your power as well as you normally do.
I'm not saying he's wielding it to the perfect degree that he can, but the fact that he has such a massive amplification of chakra going into his body, even if he's not using it to its most optimal extent, could still potentially increase his speed far greater than his time. You know what I mean? And so like we can't really say that like, you know, even base Minato can react, or like Casey and Minato. You can maybe say maybe Casey and Minato could have reacted, but I don't think you can say that base Minato could have reacted, because there is just nothing that would put him on that level. You know what I mean? There's nothing.
Again, argument from ignorance, and this is what I said earlier. In order for you to make that claim, you would have, like, let's assume the versions of Jubito are the same. In order to make that claim, you would then have to quantify how much he's being mentally nerfed and how much he's being physically amped by Kurama's chakra. Because if you can't, then you can't showcase that it's more likely than not, or more reasonable to assume, that the KCM amp outweighs the mental nerf, because they're both unquantifiable. So if you cannot so for example, you could say that the mental nerf puts him possibly at 10% of his power, right? And then you could say that the Ninetales amps him by 7 times. Then he would be at 70% of his normal power, right? That's entirely possible. It does not contradict any laws of logic. So with this particular argument, it's also bad, because you're assuming that the Ninetales amp is greater than the mental nerf, and there's no way to prove that. This is actually one of the weakest arguments that I've heard Noodles make, because it's impossible to prove that. There's literally no way to quantify it in any regard. So just because Minato has KCM doesn't mean that he's physically amped to a degree that would overcome what a physical nerf, what physical nerf would come about from being mentally nerfed. So this is just not a good argument.
No, I hear you. I think you already said that. So I didn't get you.
Keeps up with him actually indicates otherwise, right?
Okay. I think
so. He just said, I think that 14-year-old Obito keeping up with him actually suggests otherwise. They're going to get into Minato versus Obito from the Ninetales attack, so we'll go into that. But first of all, Minato's not 14 there. He should be 17 to 18. There's about a 4-year gap between Kakashi and Obito based on them graduating at the same time at 5 and 9, taking the Chunin exams together when Kakashi became a Chunin at 6, and Obito being 13 that established a 4-year gap right there. But Obito would be 13 during the time of Kanami Bridge. Kakashi would be at the oldest 10 if you think that there's like a 3.5-year gap. He would be at the youngest 8 if you think there's like a 4.5-year gap. But that would just mean that Kakashi being 14 during the Ninetales attack would make Obito 17 to 18 years old. So that's number one. Number two, there are a lot of reasons there are a lot of things that can suggest that Minato might not be at full power in that fight or going all out in terms of speed, which Shad does go into here in a minute. But just wanted to point that out.
I think I'm done with the Jubito combo, because I think I made my point. I think you made yours. Why do you think Obito kept up with Minato? We can talk about that for a second.
So here's what I would say if I were giving verdict on what's been debated so far. So we have the Jubito feat being the Toby Rama feat on Jubito being above the the Minato anti-feat against Jubito. Shad did not establish that there are plausibly 2 different versions in terms of scaling, and so he kind of like whiffed on that. But then he still offered equal possibilities across the board with the mental nerf and things like that. And then he didn't really combat the KCM amp being above the mental nerf as successfully as I think he should have, but he still did kind of get that to equal interpretations. So since Noodles was on the assertion, he should lose those points, even if I don't think this is the best performance from Shad. It was just, and he pointed out like the argument from ignorance thing, like it was just kind of lackluster in both of their performances. I think you could go through and argue that Noodles applied some plausibility to some of his claims, but I do believe that Shad applied plausibility equally on those things, so it would go to equal interpretations. I don't think Shad, I do think Shad's getting rhetorically kind of beat up here, I'm not going to lie, because Noodles is formulating his arguments in a more concise and pretty way, but that doesn't really matter. It comes down to the substance of the arguments themselves. And so with the substance of the arguments themselves, it would just come down to equal interpretation as far as whether or not that feat of tagging Jubito actually puts Toby Rama above Minato because he got tagged by Jubito.
Minato says himself that Obito saw through all of his moves in the pain arc.
Yeah, he's talking about his moves to protect Kushina.
His moves in general. He said,
little debate tip. Don't ever make a claim like that. Don't ever say, don't ever say that this is the case without having some sort of evidence. Because if you're going against a good debater, somebody who's sharp, especially in like an informal setting like this, like in a formal debate, you're going to be able to give opening statements, and then somebody will have like 2 minutes to defend their points, and then somebody will have 2 minutes to negate that point, 2 minutes on the other side, 2 minutes on the other side, and then you'll have like closing statements. But an informal style where you're just going back and forth like this, if you were to say, yeah, he's talking about the moves to protect Kushina, it's like, okay, prove that. Why is that statement only in reference to that? You just took a certainty or at least probability position. Can you showcase that? That's a really bad move to make as a debater. Noodles didn't pick up on it, or if he did, he just didn't decide to attack it. So I would just say if you guys are interested in doing any kind of debates, try to avoid making claims like that. Instead of saying like that, or instead of saying something like that, you could just say, well, he could be just talking about in reference to his moves to protect Kushina, because then you have a possibility. So now you have equal possibilities. Noodles is kind of asserting that he literally saw through every single move that he made. And then Shad would be asserting, well, it's equally possible that he's only referring to like these specific moves. And he does go on to establish plausibility for this here in a minute, or at least implausibility for it being in reference to all of the combat moves, which you guys will see. But just kind of a pretty bad blunder there from a debate perspective from Shad.
all of my moves.
Well, he didn't see through all the moves because Flying Rising level 2 worked. So he didn't
The
see
manga
through that.
disagrees with you, though. The manga says all of my moves.
Well, okay, so he can either be talking about all of his moves in the fight or all of his moves that he used to protect Kushina, which Obito did see through all of. If you
No,
interpret
they
it that way,
don't
that's just
specify
contradictory.
Kushina at all. They don't specify Kushina
Yeah,
at all.
that's not
They say
specified,
all
so
of
you
my
just
moves.
interpret it in a way that's not contradictory. Minato,
But you're
I'm sure
interpreting it in that way baselessly. Like you're basically
that's not
pulling that out
baselessly.
of your life, right?
I can give multiple examples of moves that Obito was able to see through completely, and then there's a bunch of moves he.
So this goes back to what I said earlier. It's not baseless to say something is logically possible, because the basis is in logic. So saying it's baseless for you to say that that statement is in regards to all the moves to protect Kushina and Naruto is just false. Like you can't. It has a basis in logic, and therefore it's not baseless. This is something that a lot of debaters get caught up on because they don't understand that possibilities have basis. If he said it's reasonable to assume that it's in reference to these things and didn't apply a further basis on top of logic from like empirical or reasoning or whatever kind of epistemology you want to appeal to, then he would have a claim that it's a baseless plausibility or a baseless reasonability. But to say it's a baseless possibility whenever it's based in logic is just not sound.
Wasn't able to see through completely.
No, I think he was able to see through his moves. I think it's just the case that even if you can see the moves, that doesn't mean you can physically react sometimes. And like basically what happens is in the moment where Minato finally finishes him off, Minato even says, this fight is going to be decided in one moment. Whoever wins this next exchange is going to win the fight, right? So he's basically saying that like either he outspeeds me and kills me, or I outspeed him and kill.
So Foxes, Noodles and I are trying to get a debate going. We just want to have a bigger content creator stream it so we can get as much visibility as possible. So it's going to happen. We're just waiting.
Him, it's life or death, right? There's no in between. There's no going to be like there's not going to be a back and forth after this. This is the most pivotal moment of the entire fight. So he won that moment, and he did, and he proved himself to be above Obito in that moment. That being said, that doesn't dispute the fact that in that moment, Minato was recognizing Obito as a legitimate threat to his life and could have won.
I agree, but
so I think that in the fact that he's moving alongside him when they're running at each other and they're running on panel.
Okay, they're not moving alongside each other. Hold on, you can't dictate their speed based on the panel. Yeah, but we can't say they cover the same distance though, so we can't say they're moving the same speed.
I mean, that's kind of what.
That is a really, really good counter to that particular point. Saying because they're running at one another, unless you can showcase the distance that both of them cover in that same time frame, you can't say that they're moving at the same speed. Speed equals distance over time. Therefore, if we have time frame being X amount of panels, we know that they moved some distance in that time frame. But if you can't establish that the distance itself is relative, then you can't establish that their speed is relative, because half of the speed equation is missing. So that's a good counter to that. What I would have said from the beginning of this, whenever he said he saw through all of his moves, I would have said, well, okay, so what does he mean by all? Does he mean literally every single one? Or is he using more of like a colloquial usage of that? Because we know, like, if I were to say something like, all of the presidents from in my lifetime have sucked, like, that could mean that all of the policies from the presidents in my lifetime have sucked. I could be saying that in a legitimate way, like in a literal way, I guess, in saying that every single policy they put forth sucked. But I could also just be saying that in a colloquial way, in saying that, like, the vast majority of them I wouldn't agree with, even if there are some that I think I would agree with. So, or like if you were to say all humans have 5 fingers and 5 toes. It's like, well, we know not all of them do, but it's a general rule that humans have 5 fingers and 5 toes. So there's a way to kind of get around that and say, like, for example, if I were playing chess and I was like, I'm playing against a grandmaster and I'm like, man, he saw through all of my moves. That doesn't necessarily mean that he saw each and every move that I did coming before it came. It just means that he dominated the chess match in a way that might make it appear as if he did see everything coming. And that kind of leads me to the second contention I would have with this, which I think is the stronger one, which is Minato is making a knowledge claim. Minato is making a claim that Obito saw through all of his moves. He cannot read his mind, so we do not know if he actually literally saw through all of his moves. And in fact, the contention that Shad put forth in regards to him not seeing through Flying Raijin level 2, he should have hammered that home a little bit harder, because we actually do just see that whenever he uses FTG level 2, Minato, or Obito, is convinced that he wins, right? He says, I win. Goes to grab him. Gak. He transported himself to the position of the kunai, right? So this would indicate that he thought he won, and he's surprised by the fact that he transported himself to the position of the kunai. If that's the case, we know he didn't see through literally every single move, because he didn't see through this one. So the argument that Noodles is making is they're relative because they run on panel at the same speed. That's debunked by the distance over time thing I brought up earlier. And then, yeah, literal versus metaphorical language, exactly. And then the claim that he's relative because he literally saw through every single move that he did is debunked by this right here. Him being convinced that he wins, and then being surprised by the fact that he transported himself to the kunai, kind of debunks that. Also, you could just steelman that position and say that he did see through everything, but does that mean that he saw through everything before it happened? Not necessarily, because you could argue he is seeing through what he did here. He is seeing, oh, he transported himself to this kunai. You could argue that when he says he saw through all of my moves, that he's accounting for this as Obito seeing through his technique. But that doesn't mean that he saw through it before it happened. And we know it's unlikely to be the case that he did. So there are a few different ways that you can combat that claim that would require for him to establish plausibility, which is just not really an easy argument to make.
But they're showing indicative of the panel.
I also don't think
the panel. And this in the anime is even more blatant.
I usually don't talk about it, but I don't even... Okay. When you come back, I'll make a point.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I was about to say, I don't even think Minato in that instance was necessarily moving his full speed.
You don't think Minato in that instance was moving his full speed when it's life or death and he's about to either die or win?
Yeah, well, the plan here...
Like, if he dies, the whole village gets destroyed.
I know what you're going for. I got you. I think in that instance, Minato's whole goal is just to position a kunai behind Obito to catch him off guard. He doesn't have to run at his full speed to do that.
Hold on, say that again, sorry.
in that instance that we're talking about with Flying Rising level 2, his plan is to just position a kunai behind Obito's head.
Oh, another thing too, on the all statement, I thought of a better example. There's a statement that that says that everyone calls Minato the Yellow Flash, like calls him and respects him as the Yellow Flash. But that's probably not the case, because there are human beings that are infants who wouldn't have the cognitive capacities to actually call him or revere him as the Yellow Flash. Therefore, it's a colloquial usage, a figurative or metaphorical usage of the term all or everyone. So just because it says all people do this doesn't mean it's actually the case that all people do this. It's like Trump will say things like, let's think of a good example. Everyone agrees with this bill. All people agree with it. All people think it's the best bill ever. It's the greatest bill. That's not true. Not all people agree with it. Not everyone agrees with it. Therefore, he's using figurative or metaphorical language, not literal language. So that's another good example of like combating that particular take.
He doesn't have to run at his full speed to do that.
That statement that I referred to is in Data Book 4.
Hold on, let me get this part out too. He also wants Obito to think that the fight is over with. He wants Obito to think he's won so that he can catch him off guard with the Flying Rising level 2. None of that indicates he needs to run fast.
No, I don't think he's
Obito in the panel was like, I win. He thought he won.
Well, yeah, he did thought he won, but I don't think that you can inherently prove that was Minato's intention. That's just a byproduct of what happened. He thought he won because Minato, he thought he won because he was about to touch Minato, right? And then Minato was thought slightly further ahead and threw the kunai through his head and countered the Kamali, right?
So this is the point where you say, okay, so you concede that he didn't see through all of his moves, because he just conceded that Minato thought slightly ahead, and Obito thought that he won. If he thinks that he won, and Minato thought slightly ahead, if Noodles is conceding that, then he is conceding the idea that he did not see through all of his moves. So therefore, his argument for relativity based on that particular statement falls through. Like it doesn't work. So this is where, if you're a sharp debater and you can pick up on the language that people use, you'll be able to catch people in premise trapping themselves. Noodles literally just conceded this point by what he said. Let me rewind it one more time. Because remember, his original claim is they're relative for two different things. He made an induction. The first thing was them running at the same speed on panel. That was combated. The second thing was that he saw through all of his moves. So the idea is that in order for him to see through all of his moves, he has to be somewhat relative, right? In what he says here, he concedes he did not see through all of his moves, which means both parts of that induction are incorrect.
Intention, that's just a byproduct of what happened. He thought he won because Minato, he thought he won because he was about to touch Minato, right? And then Minato was thought slightly further ahead and threw the kunai through his head and countered the Kamali, right? So it's Minato outsmarted him, but I don't think he's intentionally trying to make Obito think that he won. Obito did just think that he won because he almost touched him.
Okay, you think he needs to run it as fast as to just throw a kunai into Obito's head?
I think he has to run it as fast as to get at Obito because Obito...
So, yeah, I hope you guys see what I'm talking about there. Also, we do know it was with a good amount of certainty, or at least it's reasonable to assume, that Minato was his intention to catch him off guard, because he says, my physical attacks don't affect his body, but he makes himself solid when he attacks me. I have to aim for a mutual strike precisely timed. He knows he's vulnerable when he attacks. It takes a long time to summon Ninetales. He won't want a lengthy battle. This is going to be over for one of us in an instant, right? So he is literally saying in this, or essentially saying in these panels, okay, he makes himself solid when he tries to attack me. I have to aim for a mutual strike. So he is trying to bait him into grabbing him and then teleport and then hit him. So it is his intention to catch him off guard with this. So what Noodles is saying is just, it's countered if you just literally look at the manga.
Was provenly reacted to him, trying to make Obito think that he won. Obito did just think that he won because he almost touched him.
Okay, you think he needs to run it as fast as to just throw a kunai into Obito's head?
I think he has to run it as fast as to get at Obito because Obito was provenly reacted to him multiple times. At this point, he grabbed his hand when he grabbed his hand when he swung the kunai.
Why is that a good reaction feed?
Because he reacts to his speed. If you think Minato's holding back his combat speed to stab Obito when he's the biggest threat to the entire village?
Well, for one.
So I would say him making the claim that he thinks that he has to run at full speed in order to pull this off presupposes that they are relative. or that he believes that they're relative. We know he's not going with his like maximum normal combat speed because he does use body flicker in combat, stated by B. He uses the body flicker technique for preemptive attacks. Whenever he says up to back quite a smash, just like the yellow flash. Whenever Naruto uses body flicker to attack Kisame, he says, was that body flicker up to back quite a smash, just like the yellow flash? So, but if you translate that kanji, that up to back quite a smash part translates to essentially a preemptive attack. Up to bat first is kind of how that's localized. So a preemptive attack was that body flicker, just like the yellow flash, right? So we know that he does use body flicker in combat to preemptively attack opponents, and he didn't use it here. So we know he's not using his peak physical combat speed. And if we know he's not using his peak physical combat speed, and he's specifically saying that he has to time up his attack, then it is reasonable to assume that he might be slowing down a bit in order to kind of lull Obito into a sense of security.
There's no reason to even say that Minato's at full power. And two,
because he reacts to his speed. If you think Minato's holding back his combat speed to stab Obito when he's like the biggest threat to the entire village?
Well, for one, there's no reason to even say that Minato's at full power. And two, he grabs Minato's wrist at the end of its attack. Why is that?
If you want to like make these like skeptic arguments about, oh, he could have been at full power or he might not have been at full power, then you're having a very regressive mindset where you can't demonstrate any character in the series ever is at full power. Unless they just outright say it.
Yeah, so that's not true. So this goes back to the evidence of absence thing I was talking about earlier, where you would say essentially, whenever somebody's not at full power, we get evidence of it. And in the absence of that evidence, we can assume that they're at or close to their full power. We have multiple examples of this. We have like Sasuke saying that Datara being low on chakra, his reaction times had slowed. So, and we know like people are huffing and puffing, they're physically fatigued and unable to keep up with people that they otherwise would be able to. Several examples of this. So in the absence of that kind of evidence, you could say that somebody is it's reasonable to assume that somebody would be close to or at their full power. So you can make an argument for that. Shad's position here would be kind of difficult to defend, but you can still make the argument that I was just talking about, where it's like, okay, so what kind of evidence would we expect? And one of those evidences is like a direct statement with the Datara thing. Another kind of evidence would be like the huffing and puffing, like physical fatigue being shown. And then another kind of evidence would be high usage of chakra. We know that when they use a lot of chakra, it does just correlate to them having lower speed and physicals. So because he had already used FTG Guiding Thunder, he had already used FTG itself in its normal state multiple times, because he was suppressing, he's going to go into this, suppressing the Nine-Tails Seal for some amount of time whenever Kushina is giving birth. Like all of these things utilize a lot of chakra. So you could just say, well, this is the type of evidence that we would expect to see if somebody were fatigued and operating below full power. So it's reasonable to assume that he is fatigued and operating below full power. So you can make kind of the inverse of an evidence of absence claim there. Noodles should have made an evidence of absence claim and said, we don't get that type of evidence. And then I feel like that might have gotten Shad here, but the way that Shad argues this, he kind of gets around Noodles' claim.
The thing here is what I like to use to establish if a character's fatigued or not is signs that they've been utilizing a lot of chakra, which Minato has been doing at this point. So saying he's at full power here or even performing at a relative level to his
What's a lot of chakra? What's a lot of chakra?
But Minato says, and I'll just list everything he does. For one, throughout Kushina's entire childbirth, which labor takes hours, he was reinforcing the seal, so he was pouring his chakra into the seal for hours.
He's used a bunch of big jutsu. We can agree that he's used a lot of jutsu.
Yeah, and then he even says that teleporting large objects takes a lot of chakra. He says that verbatim. And
yeah, but that doesn't
mean bomb right before he fights Obito.
A lot of chakra. Don't you think using Hashirama's like wood golem takes a lot of chakra? That doesn't mean you couldn't summon the Buddha hand statue right after.
That's not really what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is saying Minato's at full power despite everything he's done is unfounded.
Yeah, but saying
to be full power for the scale to matter.
Saying he's weakened at that point is also equally unfounded.
Yeah, but I'm not.
So they're both founded in logical possibility. This goes back to, this is like one of the most consistent things with, I watched the Troy, Six, and Shad debates that Noodles did over this last week. And in every single one of them, he continues to say, like, that's a baseless possibility or that's unfounded, but it's based in logic. It's founded in logic. So for him to say, oh, well, Obito reacted to Minato and is therefore relative to Minato, right? And then that presupposes that Minato is at full power, or at least close to it, right? In terms of his physical combat speed. then when Shad says, well, it's possible that he's not at full power, so we can't really say that this scales to their relativity. And then he establishes some sort of plausibility for that in saying, well, he's used a lot of jutsu, he's used a lot of chakra, therefore it's reasonable to assume that he could be fatigued, which then makes that a plausibility argument, which is above possibility. And then Noodle says, oh, well, we see other characters use like giant chakra techniques, and we don't get the evidence that they're, slowing down or anything. That would be a plausibility, a really kind of like lackluster one, but it would still function as a plausibility argument on his side, which would just mean that they have equal weight at this point in time. So the original claim of them being relative because Obito reacted to Minato doesn't actually go through, because again, like I brought up earlier, in order to combat a possibility, you only need a possibility. In order to negate a possibility, you only need a plausibility. If you have Noodles with plausibility here and Shad with plausibility here, they have equal weight, and therefore the assertion doesn't go through. Because in order to get your assertion through, in order to get your point through, if you're the one making the claim, you have to have an argument that outweighs the negation's claim. But if they're both plausible, then they weigh the same, and therefore it doesn't go through.
I'm not asserting he is weakened.
One's at full power.
Yeah, but I'm not asserting he's weakened. You're asserting he's at full power, or at least relative to his full power self. Your claim relies on that.
Hold on, I get what you're saying.
That's exactly right.
Saying my claim's reliant on that Minato, you're just arguing that he could be weakened. But what I'm saying is, you don't have any evidence that he is actually weakened. You're just assuming that. So if we have this kind of mindset that he's potentially weakened, then any character ever is potentially weakened, and you would not be able to scale at that point. That's regressive to power scaling.
Okay, I think
he did use evidence. He did use the him using a lot of chakra, which does establish a basis for it, which makes it plausible. But Noodles, again, already, he also established like a counter plausibility. So the arguments would just weigh the same, so the assertion wouldn't go through. Oshi said, it being logically possible is not a strong basis within the confines of fiction that doesn't correlate to our reality, which is governed by these laws. Well, we know that, at least in Naruto, that the laws of logic are present. Law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle, things like that. Law of identity. So we know that at least the laws of logic apply. So logical possibility would also apply. And what this comes down to is the weight of arguments. In order to get a point through, your argument has to have more weight than your opponent's. So if Shad were to claim that he's not at full power, or probably not at full power, then he would have a higher burden of proof required in order to establish that. But if Noodles is saying, yeah, he reacted to him, so they should be relative, that presupposes that he is at full power, right? So then it would be on him to showcase why that is the case. And all he would need for that is plausibility, which he establishes with the essentially lackluster evidence of absence claim with the wood golem argument. But Shad also established plausibility with the chakra fatigue thing. So they're equally plausible, which means that they carry the same weight. Just like him just saying he reacted, therefore he's relative, automatically assumes the possibility that he's at full power. But if it's equally possible that he's not at full power, those arguments have the same weight. So what it comes down to is argumentative weight here, and both of their arguments have the same weight.
I think you already said
if someone uses one jutsu, they're potentially weakened now because they use some vague amount of chakra. That's basically what you're arguing.
I think that's disanalogous, but you said that already. I responded. I think we beat that enough.
That is disanalogous, because what he was saying is like using a lot of chakra or using a lot of jutsu can just lead to somebody being fatigued. He didn't just say like using one jutsu. Like if somebody uses a low chakra taxing jutsu, it doesn't necessarily mean it's affecting their physicals. There is a threshold at which physicals would be affected. We see this throughout the series. It's usually when somebody's close to being out of chakra, which is kind of vague. But whenever somebody's close to being out of chakra, their physicals are affected. So like we get 5 different statements in regards to this. So that's kind of the route that I would have gone if I were Noodles, is say like, okay, well, we get multiple statements throughout the series that suggest that this kind of physical regression occurs whenever somebody is really low on chakra. So unless we can establish that he's reasonably really low on chakra, we can't establish that his physicals have taken a hit. So I think it's more reasonable to assume that he's closer to his full power. But then Shad could counter that by saying, well, we know summoning uses a lot of chakra. We know FTG uses a lot of chakra by virtue of requiring 3 Jonin level combatants to use it. We know the Rasengan uses a lot of chakra. We know FTG Guiding Thunder uses a lot of chakra whenever, and then like just teleporting large objects uses a lot of chakra. So if he's using a bunch of techniques that require a lot of chakra, then it's reasonable to assume that he's getting pretty low on it. And then you have you get back to where we're at right now, which is plausibility on both sides, which is equal weight, and therefore the assertion doesn't go through. John said, so even if skepticism was regressive power scaling, skepticism is still necessary to validate claims. So that doesn't invalidate anything. It just means we have more homework to do. Yeah, exactly. Like if your assertions can't get past equal possibility skepticism, then your arguments are not good. You have to establish greater weight on the side of the assertion. And if you can't do that, then your position is weak.
What other...
Okay,
you were talking about the swinging through his head part. Why do you think that's a feat?
Because Minato would actively be trying to kill him there, and Obito's able to like materialize in that moment and react to his speed, his combat speed.
Do you think he's relative to Minato, like Obito is?
I don't know if...
So right there, I'll rewind it again, but whenever he says he's trying to kill him, and therefore he's going at his full speed, that presupposes that killing intent requires somebody to go at full speed, which I talked about earlier. Squashing an ant doesn't require for me to go at full speed. There's further argumentation required in order to get that presupposition through. So that's also a weak argument, but Shad doesn't catch it.
That's a feat.
Because Minato would actively be trying to kill him there, and Obito's able to like materialize in that moment and react to his speed, his combat speed.
Do you think he's relative to Minato, like Obito is?
I don't know what you would define relative as, but I think he has the reaction speed to grab a hold of his wrist, wherever that is.
Okay, well, if he grabs a hold of Minato's wrist when Minato's attack is already completed, and Minato is clearly thrown into surprise because his attack passed Obito's head, why is this a good reaction feat? Like, I agree he reacted, but why is this a good feat? Like,
because it shows that's a 14-year-old Obito, not the adult that's trained several
17 or 18
decades since and got a whole 10 tails, a measurable chakra amp inside of him, and yada yada yada. Not the six pads Obito. Like the 14-year-old one is able to react to his movement speed, and Toby Rama is able to react to that Jubito. So it just shows that he does have faster reaction speed as a feat, and it displays that these characters who are reliant on reaction speed to teleport and dodge things through teleportation and attack people through teleportation, that's a very big deal in this kind of fight, because that means that if Toby Rama can just think to teleport out of way of Minato's attacks, Minato will never be able to hit him, ever.
Hold on.
Yeah, so that also just presupposes that Minato's going all out in terms of his speed there, which we already went over why that's not the case. Also, something Six pointed out to me, he sent me a bunch of scans. There's like 7 different panels where we see them react simultaneously, Minato and Toby Rama. So their reaction speeds are pretty definitively around the same level. He doesn't go into that. I'm not sure if Shad is familiar with that, but the reaction speed thing can be combated easily by just like pulling up those scans.
I'm sorry, I kind of got lost in all like the rhetoric about like, oh, Obito this isn't the one that's way stronger. This is a younger Obito. What was the response to me asking how this is a good reaction feat? Because that's what I was questioning. Like, why is this good? I'm not
saying it's quote unquote good. I'm saying that because a 14-year-old Obito can react to him, a Toby Rama that can react to the fastest character in the series to that point should be able to react to Minato as well.
Okay.
It's a better feat. You see what I'm saying? It's literally just objective.
I mean, yeah, you could say that that's the case for this version of Minato, but again, it hasn't been established that A, he's going all out, or B, he's close to full power, so it doesn't really matter.
Even if
a better feat.
Okay, even if Obito can react to Minato spinning 180, because even if we're talking about like people having a relative interaction, if 2 people aren't moving a similar distance at all, I don't even know why you would say that they're relative, because Minato's able to spin around completely and pass his arm through Obito's head. In the same amount of time, all Obito can do is rotate his wrist. But why do you think him reacting to that would mean he could react to Minato like throwing, I don't know, a forward kunai strike or a kick or some shit?
Don't get it twisted, bro. I don't actually care about the combat speed relativity, because Toby Rama doesn't even need combat speed to teleport. He only needs reaction speed. He's also a user of the Flying Thunder God. So that means
he only needs speed to attack.
Well, he can attack from the back and catch him off guard, just like he almost did to Rinnegan, like the strongest Madara we'd ever seen in the series.
So a good way to go about this would be to say, yeah, I agree that whenever he has kunai or markings in the battlefield, that all he needs is his reaction speed. That's true. Same thing for Minato. But in character, Toby Rama doesn't just scatter markings all over the battlefield at the beginning of the fight. So, like Minato does. So, at the beginning of the fight, at least, it would come down to his physical combat speed. It wouldn't just come down to his reaction speeds. So, I think that's a good way to combat that. In saying just like stylistically, that's not how he tends to approach his fights. So at least for some portion of the fight, the physical combat speed would matter.
Wait, why are you saying that Like if he teleported behind Minato, Minato wouldn't take notice of it and then attack him before
Because
he could
it
attack
took Madara with a Rinnegan to even notice it, and Madara still said that he got caught off guard.
Okay, you can't say just because that is what reacted to it, that's what's necessary to react to Toby Rama.
No, it is because we saw that Madara said.
No. It could be the case that you could be at a lower combat speed or reaction speed than Sage Madara was there and still react to him. So it's not like that's the floor that would be necessary to react to somebody on the level of Toby Rama. Shad's entirely correct there. But this is actually something I really want to get into, this next part, so I'm just going to let this play for a second.
Madara with a Rinnegan to even notice it, and Madara still said that he got caught off guard.
Okay, you can't say just because that is what reacted to it, that's what's necessary to react to Toby Rama.
No, it is because we saw that Madara said, listen, this is exactly what was stated about it. He said that for whatever reason, he says, look at you two brothers. You used to boast the fastest speed of any shinobi, but look at you now. For whatever reason, whether the gods are smiling on me or not, I'm probably butchering this. He says, I have the edge now. There's a reason you two brothers can't regain your full power. So what he's saying is basically because of these amplifications I've attained, such as the Hashirama cells in Sage mode, the Rinnegan getting revived, because of all these amplifications, and Toby Rama is like a nerfed Edo Tensei, he says that like it was always like you to strike from my back. And catch them when they least expect it. So, but because I have these amplifications, I'm able to react now. Those amplifications are Sage Mode and Rinnegan Vision, which both give him an extreme enhanced sensory reaction to it. So,
first, John, yeah, it happens as Jubito's running past him. So, like, whenever Jubito cuts him and Hashirama in half, he places the seal underneath Jubito's armpit. I've went over it, so if you guys haven't seen my Minato versus Toby Rama is weird video, feel free to go check that out. I cover that in detail there, but essentially it doesn't necessitate physical relativity over any distance other than the distance that Jubito covered there. And I got it pixel calced, and it's something like 23 feet of distance, and at best, like if you're really generous to Toby Rama, you could say he moved his arm like 2 feet. If you think he reaches back into his back pocket and grabs paper bombs and then throws them at Jubito as he's running by, and then places the seal. Like, you could be really generous and say he moves his arm like 2 feet. But that doesn't make him relative. It makes him like 1/12 the speed. So it's like, okay, so if he's 1/12 the speed, why is that above anything that Minato's done? And there's no connective tissue between that particular level of speed in relation to that particular Jubito and Minato. I want to get into this Madara statement in a second, but I'm going to let this play until I feel like it's a good stopping point.
So, but because I have these amplifications, I'm able to react now. Those amplifications are Sage Mode and Rinnegan Vision, which both give him an extreme enhanced sensory reaction to it. So he's able to see behind him, he's able to sense behind him, and that's going to be a major problem for Minato, because even that Madara with those amplifications still stated he got caught off guard, and that Madara is also provably or justifiably faster.
I don't think he did.
Okay, so 3 things. Number 1, the way he's framing this is, let me just pull up the chapter. But the way he's framing this presupposes that Madara without those amplifications wouldn't be able to react to, wrong chapter, wouldn't be able to react to Toby Rama. Which there's an equal interpretation to this that works out just fine. I think it's towards the end of this chapter. It might be the next one. It's after he beats up the Bijou. Yeah. So it presupposes that, which is not provable. You can't say that he wouldn't have been able to react if he didn't have those amplifications. Also, the second thing is, he claims that Madara says he was caught off guard. That's never stated. He says it's your MO to attack somebody whenever they're sure of victory. So he's standing here, right? Toby Rama appears behind him, flying Raijin Slice, knocks his hand up into the air, goes to stab him, he teleports to the kunai, catches it, goes off panel, and he says, it's your MO to strike an opponent just when he's convinced of victory, meaning he knows that this is how he fights. So you can then establish a plausibility that he expected for him to do this. It's like if you have sparred with somebody a lot and you know whenever they throw a jab and then a cross that they follow it up with a kick a lot, you would then be expecting the kick. It's their MO to throw a kick after they throw a jab cross, right? So he's saying it's your MO to strike an opponent just when he's convinced of victory. he probably expected this, or plausibly, I should say. So him saying, and also he never says he was caught off guard here. That's literally the only thing. So that's the second thing. The first thing is his argument presupposes that Madara would not have been able to react to this otherwise without the amps. We just can't prove that. The second thing is he argues that Madara states he was caught off guard, never stated. The third thing is this following thing is a conjunctive statement about the brothers. So let me just read it. He says, making the brats work, you're still a delegator, Toby Rama. Toby Rama says, I could say the same to you. And then Madara says, ho, but I'm the one the heavens are smiling upon. Look at you, who used to boast the fastest speed of any shinobi. There's a reason why you two brothers can't regain your full power. Whether coincidence or inevitable, I've got the edge right now. Okay? He just got done beating up Hashirama. We know that Toby Rama and Hashirama fought together because whenever Toby Rama is using the FTG in conjunction with Naruto to hit Jubito with the Sage Rasengan, he says it reminds him of his battles with Hashirama. So we know that they used their abilities in conjunction. So that's very important because when he says there's a reason you two brothers can't regain your full power, I've got the edge right now. It could be the case that he's saying against both of them together, he would have the edge right now, not just individually. Because if you take the interpretation that Noodles is taking to its furthest logical conclusion, where it takes you to is Toby Rama has a speed edge over Madara that wouldn't allow for a live Madara to counter this tactic. But we know, it's stated like 7 different times, that Hashirama was peerless during their time, and the only person who could combat Hashirama was Madara, and the only person who could combat Madara was Hashirama. If Toby Rama had a speed edge over Madara, like what he's implying, and Madara was unable to react to it because of the speed advantage, then he would be able to combat Madara. So it's unlikely to be the case that he's making this statement in reference to them as individuals. It's more likely to be the case he's making this statement in reference to them together. So, or more plausibly the case, I should say. So not only does the presupposition that he has of Madara not being able to react to this without these amplifications fall through, there's no justification for that. The statement that he said was there in regards to him saying that he was caught off guard also doesn't exist. And this conjunctive statement, if it's a conjunctive statement about the brothers, then the conclusion should also be conjunctive. You're saying you two brothers can't regain your full power, therefore I have the edge. Conjunctive statement, conjunctive conclusion. Totally reasonable interpretation of this. And there's no real way to counter that. So it would come down to equal interpretations here, but I do think that applying the line of logic that they fought together, and therefore he could be talking about them using the FTG in conjunction with Madara's abilities, is a reasonable assertion and makes it more plausible that that's what he's referring to. So not only is the like pragmatism argument of it's more pragmatic to keep a conjunctive statement conjunctive in its conclusion, like a conjunctive premise can would lead to a conjunctive conclusion. If you say, well, A and B, therefore C, you don't then just say, well, A, therefore C, or B, therefore C. It's a conjunctive premise that would lead to a conjunctive conclusion. So all 3 points that he made there just don't follow through, especially with him on the assertive. Now, if you're on the assertive on the other side, you also wouldn't be able to get your point through, more likely than not, without being a rhetorical demon. But at best, what this comes down to is equal interpretations if you argue it correctly.
He's able to sense behind him, and that's going to be a major problem for Minato, because even that Madara with those amplifications still stated he got caught off guard, and that Madara is also provably or justifiably faster.
I don't think he got caught off guard. He takes notice of Toby Rama. He takes notice of Toby Rama the moment he appears. He does an exclamation point immediately.
That exclamation point is to indicate surprise, because he says it's just like you to catch me off guard, like indicating that
he takes notice of.
No, he says it's your MO to attack somebody when they're certain of victory. So that could reasonably mean that he predicted that that's what he was going to do, and countered it the way he did off panel. So it's like you can't get that point through either if you're Noodles.
So something he's not off guard.
Also, he claimed that Madara is justifiably above Minato without applying any like scaling or anything, which would be a separate point. But there's also no way that I'm aware of to definitively get him above. And actually, you can get at least Minato's body flicker speed above Madara's combat speed, because you have Minato's body flicker being above Kurama's combat speed in saving Kushina. I've had that pixel calced as well. At worst, it's like 1.3 times the speed of Kurama. At best, it's like 7.8 times the speed of Kurama. I just go with the low end. But Kurama is physically relative to the Susanoo. Susanoo is stated to be faster than the user. So even if you say that there's not like a giant gap, you would have Minato at least slightly above Kurama with body flicker, Kurama relative to Susanoo, Susanoo some degree above Madara. So you actually have a easier time scaling Minato over Madara than you'd have Madara over Minato in terms of combat speed.
You said what?
If he takes notice of it and then immediately reacts, he's not off guard. And
He got
doesn't
off
say
guard
that.
initially, yeah. He got surprise attack, and he says the only reason he was able to react is because of his amplifications, which Minato would not have access to.
Not stated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if he can sense, because the moment Toby Rama appears, Madara has eyes on him, so they wouldn't be off guard. But
It would be,
regardless,
because
why
he-
are you acting
that-
like, hold on, even if Madara says that, like, because of these amplifications, I can now react, that doesn't mean that you need to have that level of strength to react. Madara's just saying that it's because he has that he can't. Not that if he was at
Yeah.
a lower level or even if he's
that,
at like
that does
half of
imply
that
that he
strength.
didn't. He's
I also think that Shad kind of blundered there by accepting that it's because of the amplifications that he's able to react to him, because he doesn't cover the fact that it's a conjunctive statement about the brothers not being able to regain their full power, and therefore should be a conjunctive conclusion. So he is just accepting here that Madara was able to react because of the amplifications, which both justifies the presupposition that Noodles had about Madara being below Toby Rama in terms of combat speed, as well as the claim that he would require these sensory capabilities to react to him. So that's kind of a blunder on Shad's part. It doesn't, even though I would say even if you though accept that he's above Madara in physical combat speed, there's no connective tissue to put Madara above Minato in terms of combat speed. And therefore, if you're on the Toby Rama side, if you get that point through, and I go over this in my Minato versus Toby Rama video, if you get that point through of Toby Rama some amount above Madara in terms of physical combat speed, then if when the Minato scaler goes, it would just be your burden to like get his physical combat speed below somebody that you can put Madara above, or relative to somebody that you can put Madara above, which is difficult to do. But it's not impossible. Like, if you, on the Minato side, if you accept this argument of Toby Rama relative to or above Madara in terms of combat speed, you do just open the door for them forcing you to set a lower ceiling on Minato, which then would allow for connective tissue. So it's just not a good way to go about it on Shad's part, but it would still require more than just saying, oh, well, Madara above Minato. It's like, okay, why? You know?
He literally says, if you, like, because there's a reason you two brothers can't regain your full power right now. For whatever reason, I now have the edge.
Conjunctive statement, conjunctive conclusion, been over this.
So what the implication there is, if he didn't attain those powers and if they weren't nerfed, he would not have the edge against these two brothers. Specifically in that moment where
what does
Toby
that
Rama
have to do with
Yep, above the two brothers together.
What does that do with Minato? What if Minato's already...
And also, like, people will be like, oh, well, he lost to Madara in life, or he lost to Hashirama in life, so it doesn't make sense because he didn't have the edge over him in life. It's like, well, if we're accepting that he's stronger at this point in time, or has greater combat speed at this point in time, due to his sensory reactions, then it wouldn't be unreasonable to say that he would just beat Hashirama in a 1v1 at this point in time. So then it still follows that this statement could be applicable to both brothers together, not just individually.
Madara is faster than like base Hokage Minato, bro.
Okay, based on that.
Based on the fact that he's able to fight people like Hashirama. And
Yo, John with the 5, thank you so much, man. Really out here making a fair and balanced commentary. You're really a Naruto YouTuber. I appreciate that, man. Thank you for the 5. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of philosophy and logical argumentation and stuff. I always have been. Like, I've read a lot of books on logic and philosophy. And so I do think I just have a better understanding of this stuff than a lot of Naruto YouTubers do. And I think that's being showcased here. But yeah, it's like, I just get tired of the bad arguments floating around. Like there's so many bad arguments that have been made here. There've been arguments from ignorance. There have been, premises or conclusions that don't follow the premise. There have been, certainty claims that haven't been backed up. There have been the misunderstanding of probability or of possibility. Like one of the things that Noodle said in, I think it was either the 6th or the Troy debate. He said that they're making an appeal to possibility fallacy because they're saying it's also possible that, Jubito's not going all out. But the problem with that is an appeal to possibility is the argument that because something's possible, it's probably the case, and that's obviously fallacious because something can be possible and not probably the case. So he just doesn't understand appeal to possibility either, which you don't see in this one, I don't think. But yeah, they're just like a lot of bad arguments, and so I'm just trying to correct those here. But I appreciate you. Thank you for the 5.
And KC2 Naruto.
Battlefield before Hashirama. And when is he
That's run speed. That's running speed. That's not combat or reaction.
Well, Minato has to react to himself moving.
Based on the fact that he's able to fight people like Hashirama and KC2 Naruto.
Battlefield before Hashirama. And when is he?
Yeah, so this goes into he basically said why is he above Minato, and then they're gonna go into the body flicker to the battlefield thing.
What if Minato's already at a level?
That Madara is faster than like base Hokage Minato, bro.
Okay, based on.
Based on the fact that he's able to fight people like Hashirama and KC2 Naruto.
Battlefield before Hashirama. And when is he?
That's run speed. That's running speed. That's not combat or reaction.
Well, Minato.
So yeah, so he basically said, why is this Madara above Minato? And then Shad said, because, well, and he said because he's able to fight. Noodle said because he's able to fight people in the level of Hashirama, which presupposes that Hashirama has better combat speed than Minato. And then I think in that position you should just like force him to showcase why Hashirama has better combat speed than Minato, which is not possible. So if he just like traps him there, then his point doesn't go through. But he basically steelmans that idea or accepts that premise to some degree. Or he doesn't accept it. Instead of saying why is he above him, he then makes a claim on his own side saying, oh, well, he made it to the battlefield first, which the argument that he's trying to make is he made it to the battlefield first, therefore he's faster. So instead of keeping the burden on Noodles to provide evidence for Hashirama being above Minato, he then shifts the burden onto himself to now provide why the making it to the battlefield feat should put Minato above Hashirama, or at least relative to him, which is not a good thing to do. If you don't have to shift the burden onto yourself, do not do it. It's never a good idea. It's a lot harder to argue for something than it is to negate something else, most of the time. Honest, I go live whenever I can, every couple of weeks, probably like twice a month. But I have a Discord server. The link is in the description. If you want to join that, I make announcements in there when I go live. So if you wanna do that, feel free to go check that out.
Minato has to react to himself moving. You know that.
Yeah, but running fast is not impressive. Like, how fast does Hashirama run? Why is this a good feat?
I don't know, but if Minato can react to himself moving at a speed that's beyond Hashirama, why are you saying Hashirama?
You don't understand the difference between travel speed and combat speed, bro. Do you think that?
Okay, so this is where this argument can work. You would say body flicker is how they got to the battlefield. Noodles accepts that. He believes that it's body flicker, so you wouldn't have to like jump through hoops of it potentially being FTG. But if they accept that it's body flicker, and then you showcase that Minato's body flicker is faster to some degree than Hashirama's because he's able to make it to the battlefield first, and then you establish that Minato uses body flicker in combat, so his body flicker speed does directly scale to his combat speed. And then you establish that body flicker is stated to go far beyond normal speed. Like it's stated that in the data book file on body flicker, that the user amplifies their entire body with chakra and allows for them to move at speeds that appear as if they're teleporting. So if you put those things in place, let me just run through it one more time. So Minato's body flicker above Hashirama's. Minato's body flicker scales to his combat speed because he uses it in combat. Body flicker goes beyond normal speed, far beyond normal speed. Therefore, the body flicker speed of Hashirama should go far beyond his normal speed, and therefore Minato's body flicker should go far beyond Hashirama's normal speed. Therefore, the conclusion would be, if Noodles is claiming that Hashirama and Madara are relative, then Minato's body flicker combat speed would be above Madara. So it's a lot more difficult to pull that off than it is to just keep the burden on Noodles and say, well, why is Hashirama above Minato? But if you're going to go this route, that would be sort of the path to take.
Usain Bolt would beat Muhammad Ali in a fight?
Honest, I did a breakdown on this earlier. I'm going to leave this stream up so you can go back and watch it. But essentially, the levels of argumentative weight, in the middle you have possibility, which just means that it's logically possible, doesn't contradict any laws of logic. Therefore, it has a basis in logic, one basis, okay? Then plausibility would be above that, which is it has the basis in logic, which is like kind of the line for possibility, but also it has a basis in something else. So it would be basically like if you go outside and your car's gone, it's possible that aliens came and took it. It's more plausible that a human being came and took it, or like somebody came and towed it away or got stolen or whatever, because you can point to examples of that happening. So you have two bases from which plausibility functions. You have one basis from which possibility functions. So possibility based on logic, plausibility based on logic and empiricism usually. And then probability would be based on logic, and then empiricism to a certain extent that showcases that it happens more often than not. And then certainty would be above that, which is if the premise is true, then the conclusion is also necessarily true. So you have the difference between possibility and plausibility is just possibility has one basis, and then plausibility has two. Yeah, no problem at all. Okay.
I agree that. Well, I agree in some. Well,
Answer the question.
Yeah, so Solus, you can just go through the three laws of logic and showcase why a particular thing doesn't contradict the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, or the law of excluded middle. That's pretty easy. A lot of people don't know how to do that because a lot of people don't know those laws, but that doesn't work on somebody who's actually familiar with them. So, yeah, you suck.
Usain Bolt doesn't know how to throw punches and shit, so obviously he would lose.
So you would agree that his punch speed doesn't necessarily, bro. Do you think that Usain Bolt would beat Muhammad Ali in a fight?
Yeah, so he's establishing that there are different kinds of speed, combat and reaction, or combat and travel speed, to combat the claim that Shad put a burden on himself with. I'm doing good, Muhammad. How are you? So again, Shad should have never put this burden on himself. He should have just stuck with why is Hashirama above Minato, and then that would have just kind of destroyed the claim that that Noodles was making. But instead, he shifted the burden onto himself, and now he's being tasked with providing why that body flicker feat puts him above Hashirama, which is a lot more difficult to prove, but I went through the sort of lines of thought that you would have to go through to get that through. But yeah, so he's basically saying, well, punch speed is different from run speed, so how do we know that their run speed scales to their punch speed?
Well, I agree that. Well, I agree in some. Well,
Answer the question.
Usain Bolt doesn't know how to throw punches and shit, so obviously he would lose.
So you would agree that his punch speed doesn't necessarily scale to his run speed, yeah?
Yeah, but I'm sure you also agree that normally people can punch faster than they can run. Like you can throw a punch right now faster than
I do agree that that's generally the case.
Okay, so if that's the general rule, why are you saying it doesn't apply to these people?
Because, for one, Toby Rama can react to Jubito's run speed, who's like stated to be this dream-like power entity.
So that argument would usually work, but Noodles actually does a really good job of navigating that here, as you'll see here in just a second. But usually if you establish a general rule, it establishes probability for your claim. So if you say it's generally the case X, therefore it's likely to be the case here, that usually works. But if you can establish that the people that are in question here are potentially outliers, then the general rule may not apply to them, which is why shifting the burden onto yourself is bad.
He compared to Minato, so he can react to run speed that's like even better than Minato's, and not only that, but like,
I don't want to go back to that. We already went over it.
well, it's fine. You don't have to go back to it. But I'm just bringing up like there's like multiple pieces of evidence for why I think he could react to this like arbitrary run speed.
also
Like,
don't know
yeah,
how
like,
fast
let's say
that
he would
speed
beat
runs.
Minato in the 100 meter. Like, let's say Minato beats him in the 100-meter dash in a boxing match. That is not indicative that he would out punch Toby Rama, because Toby Rama's punch feats and reaction feats are just objectively superior.
But you already agreed normally people can punch fast. So Minato gets to the battlefield first, so he has a speed above Toby Rama, and then he would just be able to punch even faster than the speed he demonstrates is above Hashirama.
No, I don't think that you would be able to demonstrate that because he runs faster, he punches faster than Hashirama. I think
You agreed that that's the general rule.
No, I don't know. I agree that generally punching faster shows that you're like you can generally punch faster than you can run, and there's two different skills. Like what you have to understand is when people train and do like physical training, they're training specific muscle fibers in their bodies to attain certain tasks. So like if I'm powerlifting, right, and I'm wanting to lift a lot of weight, that's a lot different than bodybuilding because the muscle fibers are meant specifically for power, not for speed, not for explosiveness, just for sustaining a lot of weight and pushing up a lot of weight. So depending on how you train your body, you can be explosive, you can be super fast, you can be super strong and slow. Like you can train your muscles to do different things. So just because Minato has trained his body flicker well enough to run faster than Toby Rama and Hashirama does not mean he has provably trained his arms fast enough to punch, even with whatever like alleged like travel speed amp he's going to get, because that travel speed, like not amp, but you know what I mean, travel speed movement, that whatever travel speed movement he has is still just kind of arbitrary. Like we don't know how fast Toby Rama or Hashirama can like actually run. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this is what I mean by he does a really good job of combating this claim. So the people whoever's been on the assertive in this entire debate has been unable to clear the negation. So the whole like first 2/3 of this debate, Shad has been winning, but he's losing right now because he shifted the burden of proof onto himself. So whenever you look at like the argument that Shad is making, it usually works, but because it's a general rule, which would establish probability. However, whenever you can establish that the characters in question and how they utilize their bodies could just potentially be outliers, now it would be on Shad to establish why they're either not outliers or why it's still plausible that even with them being outliers, the punch speed for Minato would be above the punch speed for Toby Rama. But again, this is why the better argument is going to be Minato uses body flicker in combat. Body flicker goes far beyond normal speed. Therefore, being above Hashirama's combat speed should put him, with his body flicker combat speed, above Hashirama's combat speed, which would then combat it. And there are ways to get around that if you're on the Toby Rama side, which is why I say do not shift the burden onto yourself. Duel. I'm going over Minato versus Toby Rama. It was Shad and Noodles.
Maybe there's some kind of feat that I'm overlooking, but I can't think of any off the top of my head where they run particularly fast. But I can think of feats where Toby Rama has reacted and punched really fast. So I still think it's a reasonable argument to say that because he can react to these characters running at him at speeds like Jubito and Madara and things like that, and can react to their combat speed, which we agree, combat speed's generally faster than run speed. I think these are all indications he would be fast enough to dodge every single one of Minato's attacks.
So this would work over a certain distance. So this is why I said earlier it would have been really important for Shad to make the distinction between unstable Jubito and stable Jubito, because then that entire point falls through. Since he didn't, it does hold, right? But then he made the mental nerf argument, which then ended up negating Noodle's overall premise. So he ended up winning that point overall. But now it's coming back to bite him in the ass, because it's like, okay, well, if he can react to somebody who should be faster than Minato, which you do have to kind of prove that, but I do think it's reasonable based on the godlike power thing. And he did just kind of like let that go through as well. Again, you can negate it, but Shad put himself in a much tougher position than he needed to be in here. But with the body flicker argument, if he would have went that route with Minato, you could then just say, if he were on the negation, which he's not, you could then just say, well, it's over a certain distance he can react to Jubito. So even if he's some amount faster than Minato, it doesn't mean that he would be able to react to Minato's body flicker over a shorter distance. But because he's on the assertion, he put himself in a really bad spot here.
He won't be able to react to him because he's going to catch him off guard and stab him in the back.
Damn, you said a lot of shit. I agree with because there's muscle motor neurons and whatnot. Like you train your body for specific things.
Yep.
And because obviously Usain Bolt training yourself to sprint, that isn't gonna just translate to kicking as hard as Bruce Lee or some shit. I agree.
Or fast as Bruce Lee even.
Yeah,
Because Bruce Lee's training explosiveness in his hips, not his calves. You know what I mean?
We can agree there. Like, obviously, specific training can have specific muscles. The reason I brought up like the whole general rule thing was just because if we as normal humans can punch faster than we can run, I was sure that you'd agree that super powered humans would also have that same benefit. But regardless, I think
that works against you though, because that shows.
Yeah, what would be in question though is if that general rule works here, which Noodles did put into question. So, yeah.
That you get like Toby Rama could punch faster than he runs to some significant degree too.
Yep, exactly. Muhammad said, instead of making a book about scaling, do you think a mini lecture series about scaling would work? Yeah, that's kind of what I want to do with this. Because I have my first Naruto 101 video was me reacting to Noodle's poor arguments in trying to debunk myself and virtue. And I go over a lot of the sort of argumentative concepts there. But this one's just a lot more in depth. So I want to do more stuff like this. I like live streaming like this. It seems like you guys like this, so I'll do it more often.
Toby Rama.
Now it's not just like a normal. It's not just like a normal human punching and running. It's a superhuman. So the difference between the run speed and the striking speed could be even more significant. And it is.
Yep. So he's 100% correct that is a possibility, and now it would be on Shad to establish plausibility that exception either doesn't exist here or implausibly exists here, which is a difficult burden. Again, never shift the burden onto yourself.
It is.
Well, for one, I don't even think Minato has to throw a punch if he's fighting Toby Rama. I think he could just run into him. Like, kind of like if you got up and ran into a wall, and he just...
That's exactly right. So, if he would have went with Body Flicker Minato over Body Flicker Toby Rama, which Noodles accepts. He already accepted that. And then you say Body Flicker stated to be massively above regular speed. Therefore, their Body Flicker combat speed should be above their regular combat speed. Therefore, his Body Flicker speed should be enough, or should be faster than Toby Rama's Body Flicker combat speed. So, which would be above both of their individual combat speeds. However, he did not do that. So, he's kind of got himself in a pickle. This is why I said earlier, sometimes a bad argument is one step away from being a good argument. I'm doing good, Julian. How you doing, bro?
Run into him with a Rasengan, or run into him with a sealing jutsu, whatever. But also...
what sealing jutsu does he use in character that's not just the Reaper Death?
Let me tell you after this.
Okay, go ahead.
As far as the thing about Toby Rama appearing behind him, I think Minato would take notice immediately, because when Obito appears behind him, he takes notice immediately, and then it would just be up to you scaling like Toby Rama's combat speed, which I don't think
exactly correct.
you did. If you think you did, cool. I don't think we had to go back to it, but
definitely did.
Combat speed.
But, right.
He definitely did not scale his combat speed that high, but Shad did sort of concede the idea that without those amplifications, Madara wouldn't have been able to react, which would then get his physical combat speed above Madara's. However, he hasn't gotten his physical combat speed above Minato's because he hasn't created connective tissue between Madara and Minato. Now, you could say, if you were judging this debate, you could just say, oh, well, he did just say that Madara is above Minato in terms of combat speed, and it kind of went uncontested. But I would argue that the contention that he put forth of, well, Minato has greater body flicker combat speed, that part would be a contention for that. However, if that point falls, then there's no other contention for it, which then would just allow for the point that he made in Madara having greater combat speed than Minato to go through.
Okay. And then the sealing jutsu I think he would use to seal him, like if he chose to go that route. He doesn't need to, but if he chose to go that route, he can seal it with the Ace seal.
I just think that Toby Rama could cast Bringer of Darkness, cloud the entire battlefield with this black mist. That
doesn't he only use that in the anime?
Did he?
Yeah. I learned that from you.
The manga. I was using anime earlier. I figured we were cool on that, but whatever. If it's
to be fair,
yo, what's up, Gurn?
The prompt does say manga data book only, to be fair.
Yeah, you want to know something else interesting about that?
What?
The kind of, I think it's, whichever one's the Shadow release, I can't remember if it's Yin Yang, which one it is, but it's the...
They just talk about how Toby Rama Toby Rama has the correct... Yeah, Toby Rama has the correct release to use Genjutsu, I believe it's Yin release, and Hashirama doesn't. And so, even though Hashirama uses the Bringer of Darkness in the anime, he shouldn't actually have access to it. So it's like, according to the manga and data books, that's not a technique that he should have access to. But yeah, it is kind of an interesting point that he's making. Let me fast forward through this.
I got you, but I'm not gonna lie. The whole distinction between the anime and the manga, like in the manga, I was just poking fun at you. But I don't know. I think we beat all the points enough. I'm not gonna lie.
they kind of go over conclusions here in a second, so I'll just let this play.
Good combo. You definitely, I mean, obviously you know more about Naruto than most TikTok randoms.
Yeah, of course. And I'm not trying to come
I
at you,
expect that from you.
trying to dunk on you or nothing. I just wanted to have this combo because for some reason when I act too aggressive, people just they don't want the smoke, bro. They don't want it. So.
I'm already knowing how you come in, and you would have asked me who I think won. I think I won easily, handily. But good combo though. All jokes aside though.
Maybe next time you can get past the whole like dreamlike power thing, and then we can if you got past that, maybe we would have said something. But
I don't think you ever proved Minato didn't have a nerf or mattered. But hey.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Ronan. The problem is that Shad never established that Minato uses body flicker speed in combat, which if he did, then it would just be GG. But unfortunately, he did not, and he put a burden on himself to get Minato above Hashirama using body flicker.
Also proved that mindset's progressive and doesn't actually demonstrate anything.
So that's not true. He did not prove that the mindset's regressive. He just doesn't understand how argumentative weight works.
You gave me your opinion on that, but it didn't matter.
But yeah, that was a good debate. I appreciate you.
Hey,
I'm gonna hop out now though. I think someone from my server recorded this.
Yeah, so that's the end of it. Let me go ahead and go back to display. So basically, if I were judging that debate, I would have said that in the first half, Shad was winning because he was on the negation and he successfully negated everything that Noodles was putting forth. However, the problem is, in the end, he put a burden on himself that was not necessary, that allowed for the premise of Madara greater combat speed than Minato to go through. And Shad also essentially conceded to the idea that Toby Rama's combat speed is relative to or above Madara's. So with this particular debate, I would say that Noodles actually won it. Even though if you just went like on a point-by-point basis and graded it that way, Shad won more points. He just lost the point that was most important, which was the one at the end. And it was just kind of a blunder on his part because he did not have to accept that burden. Like, there was no reason to do that. So, yeah, definitely something that you need to look out for if you guys are going to be debating. You definitely want to make sure that you're not unnecessarily shifting the burden onto yourself, because it makes it a lot more difficult to argue the point that you're trying to argue. It's a lot easier to negate somebody else's premise than it is to establish your own most of the time. So I would say in the beginning, whenever they're going over the Jubito stuff, Shad successfully negated that down to equal interpretations. They both established plausibility on both sides for the things that they were claiming. So Noodles' original argument about being above Jubito doesn't go through, or relative to Jubito. Then when we got into the 18-year-old Obito part, Shad successfully negated that as well, by again offering an equally plausible explanation for the plausible explanation that I actually think he won that, to be honest with you. I don't think he even just negated it. I think he won that point entirely, because he made it more plausible that Minato is not going all out. But that point didn't really matter for the debate, because at the end, he allowed too many things to go through that allowed for Noodles to establish Toby Rama physically relative to or above Madara, and then Madara above Minato. Or at least his assertion was Madara above Minato. He didn't actually prove that that was the case, but the contention against that fell in the body flicker argument, because Shad wasn't able to successfully argue the body flicker argument. So I would say for the primary point in this, that final one, that Noodles won, which should lead to the conclusion, because that was the only contention given for the scale that he gave, should lead to the conclusion that Toby Rama is relative to or above Madara in terms of combat speed, and therefore above Minato in terms of physical combat speed. So, yeah, I mean, to me, I would give this win to Noodles, but I think it was a really bad performance by both people. Shad was just a couple minutes, really, away from winning the debate. All he had to do, really, is just establish the the fact that Minato uses body flicker in combat, and that body flicker speed scales significantly above normal combat speed, and therefore should be above Toby Rama's. But yeah, that's about it. I think that's all I wanted to do. I've been here for like 2 hours, so I'll just answer some questions, and then I'm going to dip out and go to the gym. Muhammad says, how can we apply for Sage's University, and when are the classes? The classes are when I release videos, and you apply by just being here. If you guys do want to become members, I do have a link in the description for memberships. They're like a bunch of different, I think the lowest one is like $2.99 a month or something. But I send all of my live streams. Basically, I leave my live streams up for like 1 to 2 days, and then I send them to members only. So, and then like old videos that I've either changed my mind on or didn't perform as well as I would have liked for them to, I send those to members only as well. So there's a lot more content for you guys to absorb if you guys do want to become members. Obviously, you don't have to if you don't want to. If you guys are wanting particular videos, I have commissions open right now. I'm working on a commissioned video right now, going over how strong Hagoromo is, giving a high-end interpretation for him at the end to sort of see, like, even with a high-end interpretation, could you get him to, like, Shibai and stuff? So that one's going to be fun. That I have a link in my description to my Discord server. So if you want to go there just to join the Discord server, feel free. But if you want to go in there and commission videos, I also have commission links. So if you guys are interested in doing that, feel free to do that. But yeah, that's about it. Is the debate you're going to do with Noodles going to be informal like this one, or formal where you start with a point, etc.? Also, if you decided a topic yet. Yeah, so it's going to be just like the normal informal style. He's never done a formal debate, so I don't want to like have an inherent advantage there. It just would kind of be unfair. And then the topic is going to be Minato versus Toby Rama. How do you think Kakashi will come back in TBV? I hope that whenever the elders were talking to the daimyo about having somebody take care of the problem of Boruto, that they were referring to Kakashi, and that we see him engage Boruto at some point in time. I think it makes the most sense. But you down to take a commission to help me disprove the lightspeed meta? I mean, yeah, I can. So I never want to do anything do a video that I don't agree with. So what I would do is I would do a video. If you were to commission that, I would do a video basically called Our Naruto Characters Lightspeed, just like I did my JJK video. And then I would go over the popular metas for getting people to lightspeed, and then go over any sort of negations that might exist. So I would argue it from both sides and then come to a conclusion at the end. But yeah, I mean, you would definitely get some arguments to negate the lightspeed metas in that video. The debate is whenever we find a bigger content creator who wants to host it. Six was originally going to do it, but he's not interested anymore. I don't want to do it on Seth's channel. People have said that a few different times, but I'm not at a point right now where I feel comfortable tying myself to him yet. It seems like he's doing better. It seems like he's kind of moving in the right direction, which I'm really happy for him in that regard. But I don't know him personally, and just from what I've seen, I don't want to tie myself to him just yet. So probably not on Seth's. If Swag were one to do it, I would definitely do it on Swag's channel. But yeah, we're just kind of waiting for that to happen. As soon as we get confirmation about a bigger content creator who wants to host it, we'll do it. I came back from a long drive with my homie. It led to an Itachi versus Minato pre-war arc debate. I was Team Minato, my homie was Team Itachi. We're screaming at the point my dog was scared. Yeah, they can get pretty heated. I think Minato is pretty clearly above Itachi, but yeah. Virtue and I have the same amount of subscribers, bro. Do it for the love of the game. Yeah, I mean, like for me, it doesn't really help me unless I do it on a bigger channel. I think people know our arguments. I think as a power scaler, I have more respect in the community than Noodles does as of right now. I've got a bigger channel than he does right now. I'm not trying to like big dog or anything, but I'm just like, the only real benefit from it for me would be to grow my channel. And the only way to really do that is to have a bigger content creator host it. Six said that debate is not happening. Well, honestly, if my channel continues to grow, like at the rate it has been, it might get to a point where my channel is just like too big to where I feel like I'm punching down too much, and I'm not sure if I want to do that. So it just really depends. My calves are actually thick, yes. I know you already did a similar video, but what is the strongest version of adult Sasuke? Oh, strongest version of Sasuke do I think adult Gaara can beat? If you're generous, you could probably say like Final Valley Part 2. But more reasonably, I would say like Kaguya fight. Would TG be a good option to host? I don't know, because I don't know how TG feels about Noodles. I know that he has actively tried to distance himself from that circle as well. So probably not, but I've had no issue with debating Naruto stuff. It just gets annoying when people assume because they're passionate while screaming it makes their points more compelling. Yeah. The substance of the arguments is what matters. Did Chakra and Naruto get retconned? If Chakra needs to be molded for it to exist, then how would Kurama siphon Naruto's Chakra while in KCM? No, it didn't get retconned. It's in the same way that, like Orochimaru says Yoroi, the guy that Sasuke fights in the prelims of the Chunin exams, in the same way that he says that he siphons his chakra via pulling directly on his mental and physical energies. It's probably what's happening there. Cavs reveal when I hit 1 million? Yeah, sure. NC Hammer? I mean, yeah, that would be fine. I'd be down to do an NC Hammer's channel. I mean, as of right now, in terms of like active Naruto content creators, he's by far the biggest. Like Swag's obviously the GOAT and has the biggest channel. But yeah. And I mean, I guess Seth's channel is bigger than NC Hammer's right now, but NC Hammer's gets more reach like per video. And also Seth, from what I've been able to see, it seems like he's doing more like Dragon Ball stuff as well. Where do I scale Yellow Mask Obito who fought Minato, both in conjunction to Minato himself and characters like Kurama, Madara, and Hashirama? I think Yellow Mask Obito is hard to scale because I don't think Minato's at full power there. So it's difficult, but I mean, he should be above like basically everybody but Minato at that time. Should be like above Itachi and people like that. I'm not doing it on Daigos. Bro said at the hammer that he's not doing it. A philosophy I've adopted from debating is a way person. A wise man once said, I don't give a fuck about your opinion. I care about the argument. Yeah, exactly. I'd school. What does that say? I'd need to school Daigo. I think I'm a better power scaler than Daigo. I think most people would agree. But yeah, that's about it, guys. It's been a good stream. Hope you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed. So, looking forward to, let's get this back over here. Virtue just messaged me. Looking forward to getting more streams out here pretty soon. Just, you know, one day at a time type thing, right? But it has been good. Where is this at? Why is what is going on? Live. There we go. I'm hoping I can just end this on the streaming software because for some reason my actual thing isn't going. But yeah, you guys have a good one. Always glad to hop on here and talk to you guys. So